Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Cecilia Hadad. On April 29, 2018, a woman's body was found floating in the Lane Cove River. The body later washed ashore near Sydney Harbour, Australia, prompting witnesses to immediately call the police. An investigation has been launched to determine who was behind the crime during their initial assessment. Police quickly ruled out accidental death, noting bruises on the victim's hands and body that suggested she had fought back. The woman was found wearing khaki pants, and her pockets were filled with rocks, likely placed by the killer to prevent her body from floating. However, the plan failed, and her body was eventually found. Police have begun the crucial process of identifying the victim. They received a report of Cecilia Hadad, 38, and the victim closely resembled her. On April 28, Cecilia's family had not been able to contact her, found it hard to believe that Cecilia, who was known for her responsibility, would suddenly cancel her plans. Concerned, they turned to the police for help. An autopsy confirmed that the body found was that of Cecilia. She was last seen alive at a barbecue with friends after returning home. She called them, but there were no further messages or calls from her phone. Concerned for her safety, her friends suspected something was wrong when she failed to show up for several meetings the following day and did not return their calls. This behavior was unusual for her. Her family told the police that she was supposed to be dropping someone off at the airport before she disappeared. Forensic experts performed an autopsy and determined that Cecilia had died from strangulation. They found signs of a struggle on her hands, suggesting that she had fought back during the attack. The investigation quickly identified the culprit. Cecilia's murder caused widespread public outrage. Partly due to her high profile in the business world, Cecilia Hadad originally came from Brazil, but later moved to Australia, where she became the director of a mining company. She was intelligent and independent. Choosing not to marry or have children at a young age, Cecilia focused on her career and pursued her own interests before moving to Australia. She worked for a large mining company in Rio de Janeiro. Her strong personality and exceptional intelligence helped her secure a high position in the company and quickly established herself as a top professional. In 2007, Cecilia moved to Australia and became a logistics manager in her field, after years of building her career and gaining experience. She set up her own company in 2016. She provides consulting services to Australians and visitors looking to start their own businesses. Cecilia's move was part of a larger migration trend that began in the mid-1970s. When many Brazilian professionals moved to Australia and other countries, this migration was supported by a government program aimed at increasing economic connectivity between different regions and continents. Cecilia joined the program later than many others, but she saw it as a path to success. She was aware of the challenges ahead, especially the language barrier, as her native language is Portuguese. However, Cecilia was ambitious and quickly set about improving her English skills. She had a solid educational background, graduating from the Catholic University of Rio de Janeiro with both a bachelor's and master's degree at the time of the tragedy. She was fluent in English, Portuguese, and Spanish. Despite her high level of education, she was always looking to improve her qualifications. That is why Cecilia continued her studies and, in Australia, received accreditation from the Melbourne Business School and the University of Tasmania. Cecilia had a short marriage that ended amicably, and she remained friends with her ex-husband. She values her relationships and stays in touch with everyone she meets, including her ex-husband. Maintaining friendly relations, Cecilia is generally known for her kind nature, which is reflected in her active participation in volunteer work. Cecilia then met Carol and Rita, who were also from Brazil. They quickly became close friends and shared everything with each other. Cecilia is known for her friendly and cheerful personality, bringing positive energy to those around her. After her divorce, she started dating Mario Santoro, a 45-year-old engineer. They first met in Rio de Janeiro when they were both in college. At that time, Mario was unemployed and his life was getting worse. When he learned that his successful girlfriend was moving to Australia, he was heartbroken. They kept in touch online for a long time, and after her divorce, she took him to Australia there. Mario found an engineering job and everything seemed to be going well. However, they began to have problems, and Cecilia decided to end the relationship later. Her friends speculated that the breakup was due to Mario's bad behavior. They described him as a manipulative person who tried to control her completely. Cecilia seemed to be starting a new chapter in her life, seeking freedom for new opportunities. However, Mario saw things differently. For him, the breakup was a terrible shock that he found difficult to accept. At first, he visited Cecilia regularly, begging for forgiveness and trying to mend their relationship. When he realized that these efforts were futile, he began to stalk her and made many violent threats. The situation escalated seriously. One day, he broke into Cecilia's apartment. Fortunately, she reacted quickly and locked herself in the bedroom for safety. She tried to convince him to stop this crazy act. Despite everything that happened, she still treated him well, which ultimately led to her death. After the attack, she chose not to report Mario to the police because she truly believed that he would not physically harm her. However, as usual, the lack of consequences only made him more emboldened. Mario turned her life into a living nightmare. After their relationship ended, he became increasingly out of control. His stalking became worse. About a week before Cecilia's body was discovered, she decided to stay with her friends, Carol and Rita, to avoid contact with her unstable ex-boyfriend Mario. When Cecilia heard about the attack at her apartment, her friends advised her not to return home. Her friends suggested that she stay with them and go to the police station the next morning, and she agreed. Her friends were worried that Mario might return and Cecilia would not have enough time to hide. However, Cecilia worked from home and all her documents and essentials were there. After only a few days, she had to return home and discovered that someone had entered her apartment several times while she was away. She realized that Mario had a copy of the key. Allowing him to come and go as he pleased, he tried to meet her at home, but fortunately, he was unsuccessful. Cecilia's friends reported that they often noticed signs of a stranger in her apartment when she was out with them, due to Mario's constant harassment. Cecilia developed a paranoid state, feeling fearful and as if she were being watched. To avoid attracting Mario's attention while at home, she lived in a constant state of tension. She would shower and cook with the lights off, trying to make it seem like she wasn't home. Cecilia even found evidence of his presence in her apartment and detected a scent that made her even more anxious. She told her friends that Mario was stalking her, but Cecilia thought he wouldn't hurt her and that she could control his erratic behavior. But she was wrong. It was clear that Mario had harmful intentions and wouldn't just stop at threats. Surveillance footage from the neighborhood security system captured Mario the day before Cecilia's body was discovered in a nearby river. He had come to her apartment 5 times throughout the day, but had not found her. He had also come several times during the night, but had not taken any action. The next day, Cecilia learned that her ex had booked a flight to Brazil and would be leaving her forever in just 4 days. The The news made her feel extremely relieved, and her paranoid thoughts seemed to disappear. Unfortunately, her relief did not last long. She had assumed that the stalker would spend the rest of the day preparing for the flight. But she was wrong. Just before leaving, Mario called Cecilia and suggested that she accompany him to the airport. Cecilia agreed and informed her friends about it. Although none of her friends supported the idea, Cecilia felt that being in a public place would ensure her safety. She believed that everything would go smoothly. Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worse. At the riverbank, the police discovered Mario's wet shoes, which he had mysteriously left behind when he took the bus back to Cecilia's house. When he arrived at her house, he changed into the clothes he had prepared in advance. Police concluded that the shoes found belonged to him because he was seen wearing the same shoes in surveillance footage that morning. Mario's cell phone signal confirmed that he was in the area where the body was discovered after the incident. Cecilia's car, which he had been using, was found, along with several footprints leading from the beach. After the investigation, it became clear that Mario was involved in her death. After the murder, he went to the airport, where he boarded a flight to Rio de Janeiro on April 29. Just 2 hours after Cecilia's body was discovered, it was revealed that he had used an Uber to get to the airport and leave the country. Police interviewed the Uber driver to ask about Mario's condition and behavior. Fortunately for the investigation, the driver had a good memory. He reported that, on the way to the airport, Mario had asked to take a short detour to drive across the river. As he crossed the bridge, he rolled down his window and threw what appeared to be a set of keys out of the car. These keys were likely Cecilia's house keys that he had used to enter his ex-lover's apartment, along with her original key. By doing so, he wanted to delay the police from entering Cecilia's apartment. This brief delay gave him enough of an advantage to escape. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the shoreline and the bottom of the reservoir. With the help of divers, they successfully recovered the keys and the Jesus keychain. Cecilia's friends recognized the accessory. Cecilia was very religious and always carried it with her. The investigation was thorough, but was hampered by reviewing surveillance footage from the city. However, with meticulous effort, the police were able to track Mario's movements on all the cameras along the route he took. It was clear that he had been driving near the riverbank for a long time. Looking for the best place to dump the body, he eventually chose one of the most secluded areas in the city, where the chances of encountering passers-by were low. The police followed Mario's route, looking for evidence of his involvement in the murder. They discovered that his cell phone was last active in the morning, suggesting that he had dumped the body shortly after the murder. After 20 minutes, he was caught on a home surveillance camera. The recording showed clear, wet footprints, supporting the theory that he had thrown his shoes into the riverbank. It appears that he got his feet wet while dragging Cecilia's body into the water. When he got home, he put the clothes in the washing machine to remove any evidence. Mario moved around the mountains. He abandoned her car near the train station, where he was supposed to have boarded the train. However, while carrying out this plan, he did not realize that he was being recorded by multiple street cameras. Police later reviewed the footage and confirmed that Mario was the driver of Cecilia's red car, and that he was the one who tried to destroy evidence of his involvement. The events of that tragic day can be recreated with astonishing precision, down to the minute. At 6:30 a.m. on April 28, 2018, Mario left his home, just a 10-minute walk from Cecilia's apartment. When he arrived, he contacted her, expressing his desire to enter the house and discuss a few questions before he flew back to Rio de Janeiro. Cecilia, sensing danger, refused his request, stating that she would only be willing to talk after she stepped outside. Mario, however, remained adamant and demanded to enter her apartment when Cecilia cut off contact. He remained outside for some time after 10 a.m. He used his key to enter the building and went up to Cecilia's floor. Despite her attempts to stop him, he forced his way into her apartment and attacked her. Forensic evidence later revealed that he strangled Cecilia, then wrapped her body in a blanket and calmly carried it to the parking lot. No one witnessed him leaving the apartment building. Allowing him to access Cecilia's car and place the body in the trunk, Mario then got into the driver's seat and drove about 10 kilometers to Lane Cove River. He stuffed Cecilia's pockets with rocks and dumped the body in the river. Understandably, he was in a hurry after that. Mario returns to Cecilia's apartment to clean up any evidence and then goes to his own home to gather everything he needs for his escape. Mario calmly changed his clothes and packed his bags. During this time, Mario drove Cecilia's car without arousing any suspicion. Australian police gathered enough evidence to link Mario to the murder, and they shared this evidence with Brazilian police. This led to Rio de Janeiro police arresting Mario on 7 July 2018. At the time of his arrest, he was at a friend's house celebrating. He surrendered without resistance. Initially, after being taken to the police station, Mario denied any involvement in the crime, however. The police persisted and presented evidence collected in Australia. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Mario eventually confessed to the murder. He denied that the attack was planned. He claimed that he had gone to her apartment to get his passport to fly home, however. An argument broke out, and Cecilia prevented him from taking the documents. In a fit of rage, he claimed that he did not strangle her, but pushed her, causing her to fall. During the fall, she may have hit her head on the floor. He described being in shock, which made it difficult for him to recall the exact sequence of events. Panicking, he carried Cecilia to the sofa and tried to wake her, but she was unresponsive. He tried first aid, but to no avail. Feeling desperate, Mario decided to dispose of her body, and any evidence linking him to her death. Brazilian police were unable to extradite him to Australia to stand trial for murder. However, they reached an agreement with another country's legal system to resolve all legal issues. This allowed Mario to be tried and sentenced in his own country, while in custody at Mario Santoro prison. He was formally charged with the murder of Cecilia Hadad. He was then transferred to a temporary detention facility to await trial, which is scheduled for June 2023. On the first day of the hearing, witnesses for the prosecution gave their testimony. The local crime squad leader represented the police in Australia throughout the proceedings. Several members of Cecilia's family also spoke in court, according to Cecilia's mother and other relatives. After her death, Mario used her mobile phone and messaging apps to pretend to be her. He tried to reassure those worried about not being able to contact her, possibly to hide evidence of the crime and stall for time to flee to Brazil. Cecilia chose not to report her stalker to the police because she believed Mario would not harm her. She did not contact the police because he was in the country on a student visa. If she had contacted the police to report him, it could have resulted in his immediate deportation to Brazil, because her pity for him had led to the tragedy. Once again, her kindness allowed his actions to go unpunished, and he became increasingly bold. Thinking he would face no consequences, Cecilia's friends have publicly criticized Mario, accusing him of intentionally harming her. They believe he took advantage of her trust. He had come to Australia because of her support, because she wanted him to have a better life, instead of appreciating her kindness. He acted shamelessly, ultimately causing her death. Cecilia's friends believe there were many warning signs that should not have been ignored. They say Mario had been stalking Cecilia since their breakup. He had shown aggressive behavior and even broken into Cecilia's apartment several times. However, Cecilia was relieved to learn that he was preparing to fly to Brazil. Her friends, especially those closest to her, were unanimous in identifying Mario as the sole perpetrator of the crime. Their suspicions were further fueled by the revelation that he had left Australia less than 24 hours after the crime. During the Australian police presentation, Cecilia's mother became unwell and had to leave the courtroom. Meanwhile, Mario appeared remorseful, publicly apologizing to Cecilia's family. He began to cry, but Cecilia's relatives considered his tears to be fake. They were convinced of his insincerity when he suddenly stopped crying after being asked another question about the investigation. The sudden change in his expression made them believe that if he truly felt remorse, he would not have changed his emotions so quickly. They saw Mario as a hypocrite who was just trying to manipulate their emotions to gain their sympathy. During the hearing, all of the police evidence was presented and Mario's defense addressed every point raised. The jury then deliberated and found Mario Marcelo Santoro guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 27 years in prison. Unhappy with the verdict, his lawyer announced plans to appeal. However, to date, no appeal has been filed and Mario is still in prison. In Rio de Janeiro, Cecilia's body was later cremated and her ashes scattered according to her wishes. This tragic ending marked the end of the life of a successful businesswoman. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ashley Wodsworth. Ashley Wodsworth was born on July 25, 2002, in Vernon Township, British Columbia, Canada. Her parents are Kenneth Wodsworth and Christy Jen Den, and she has an older sister named Haley. Ashley's family is large and close-knit, with over 50 relatives, including cousins, uncles, and aunts, all living in the same community. Ashley is a fun-loving, outgoing, and energetic girl, which makes her popular with many friends. She enjoys outdoor activities such as swimming, horseback riding, and skiing. Ashley is passionate about tennis and plays the clarinet. She is also very active on social media, frequently sharing memes, jokes, and photos. Ashley met Jack Seppel on social media in 2015 when she was 12 and he was 15. Jack was born on January 9, 1999. His mother is Tracy Dalton, who is married to Ricky. Jack's father passed away in 2019 and it is said that Jack had a strained relationship with his father. Jack did not keep in touch with his brother Jordan but did keep in touch with his sister Nadia. Apart from his mother and sister, he did not have many close relationships, choosing to interact with people mainly on social media and through video games. Some of Jack's acquaintances said that he often got into trouble at school. They remembered him as a cheerful, charming, and lively person, but he also had a dark side that showed when he was angry at himself and others. A friend of Ashley's spoke to Jack through social media and introduced the two young people to each other. Like many other teenagers, Ashley naturally connected with strangers on various platforms and formed virtual friendships, whether they had shared interests or were simply attracted to each other. Jack and Ashley quickly became virtual friends. At the time, Ashley did not have a smartphone and used the family computer to access social media, so her friendship with Jack was not a secret that her entire family knew about. Ashley's mother explained that during their long-distance relationship, Jack dated a few other girls and Ashley had her typical teenage experiences. Despite the periods of no contact, their relationship continued and they continued to communicate for many years. As they grew up, Ashley and Jack's relationship grew. they began to interact not only on social media but also through video calls. This led to a more intimate and romantic relationship. Eventually, Jack became close to Ashley's family. When family members saw the two talking, they would often greet him as if he were in the living room. Jack often sent Ashley gifts such as teddy bears and wallets. Ashley's family and friends often said that she constantly compared every guy she met to Jack. Because of the 8-hour time difference between Vernon and Essex, where Jack lives, the young couple would wake up too early and stay up too late just to talk. In 2018, when Ashley was 15, she expressed a desire to meet Jack in person. However, her family would not allow her to travel alone to another continent. Like any young couple, they sometimes argued. When these arguments led Ashley to block Jack on social media, he would create new accounts or send messages through his sister or friends. This behavior upset Ashley's loved ones, but she insists that Jack is compassionate and kind. In October 2018, Jack got Ashley's name tattooed on his arm. At the time, she was 16 and he was 19. Ashley's parents thought this display of affection was too much and warned her to be careful and not to do so. Later, during an argument, Jack stabbed Ashley's name tattoo with a knife. After that, he started to act jealous and violent. He would get angry if he thought Ashley was dating other guys, even though he continued to date other girls. However, he insisted that Ashley was the one he loved and claimed that he only wanted her. One day, Ashley called a girlfriend who was at Jack's house and told her that he wouldn't let her go. According to a friend who was present during the conversation, Ashley wasn't angry and even reacted as if she was used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop acting crazy. Ashley did not tell her parents about this, but she did tell her friends, who insisted that she stop all contact with him. Despite his frequent arguments and troublesome behavior, the couple eventually reconciled. Ashley began working at fast food restaurants and department stores, saving money to buy things. The first thing she bought was a tablet so she could use social media more privately. She then started saving money for a trip during her senior year of high school. Ashley joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated from Sighton High School in 2020, planning to study law at Thompson Rivers University to pursue a career as a lawyer. She continued to work and save money in the first half of 2021. In April of that year, she was baptized as a Mormon. Ashley, known for being bold and stubborn, decided to travel to the UK to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday. Although her parents and friends were not very enthusiastic about the idea, they could not stop her because she was of age and had her own money. On November 12, 2021, Ashley left Canada for the UK on a 6-month tourist visa, eager for her first trip abroad. Ashley and Jack met in person on November 13, 2021. That same day, Ashley updated her profile picture to show both of them. Jack, who was 22, looked much older than the cheerful 19-year-old Ashley. He had tattoos, including some on his face. During her time in London, Ashley lived with Jack at his home. Jack had been living alone since 2020 in a public housing estate in northwest Chelmsford. Despite the area's bad reputation, they explored the more beautiful parts of Chelmsford and Essex together. Jack was affectionate, attentive, full of compliments and eager to take romantic selfies. However, he could also be inconsistent and cruel. Because Ashley was on a tourist visa, she could not work, and Jack was unemployed, relying on benefits and occasional help from his mother, Tracy, who lived nearby. Ashley often posted photos and comments about their trips online, many of which showed the couple cuddling and enjoying romantic moments. She kept in touch with her family via video calls, making it seem like everything was going well. They even adopted a kitten called Winston. However, over time, instead of going for walks or sightseeing, he preferred to stay home, use illegal drugs, and play video games. In a foreign country, Ashley was limited by Jack's interests, although she loved being outdoors. Before coming to England, one of Ashley's church friends introduced her to American missionaries who would be in Chelmsford at the same time. Ashley wanted to meet these young men, who shared her faith, but Jack forbade her from going to church on Sundays. Despite this, she kept in touch with the missionaries via text messages, secretly deleting the conversations to avoid Jack's discovery. Her new church friends quickly realized that Jack was controlling and possibly abusive. When discussing her problems with them, Ashley admitted that she knew she deserved better but just wanted Jack to be happy. Jack's control did not extend to restricting Ashley's interactions with others. About 6 weeks after her arrival, Jack texted his mother to say that he had beaten Ashley because he had discovered that she had blocked 2 phone numbers in the UK, suspecting them to belong to other men, which made him jealous. While Ashley continued to post pictures of her seemingly perfect trip online, she secretly created another profile to document her bruises. She confided in her sister Haley, but threatened to stop talking to her if she told her mother, because Ashley did not want her family to hate Jack. In late December 2021, Jack overdosed on antidepressants. Ashley quickly called an ambulance. They took Jack to the hospital, where he was treated for the overdose. Ashley was then assigned as Jack's caretaker to ensure he was safe to take his medication. Ashley hid this condition from her mother and friends, but Haley accidentally revealed it. Concerned, their mother asked Ashley to return home, but Ashley insisted on staying until Jack recovered. In early January 2022, another incident occurred. Jack hit Ashley in the head with a cup, causing her to burst into tears. She called her sister on video chat while she was forced to clean up the broken glass. In the background, Haley could see Jack pacing back and forth, screaming and grinding his teeth. Although Haley begged younger sister to return home, Ashley refused. On the 9th of that month, Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday with his family as if nothing had happened, and Ashley was there. Soon after, Jack's mother and her husband arranged a family trip to a small coastal town, hoping that a change of scenery would ease the tension. The trip looked so perfect in the photos that even Ashley's parents, who had no idea of the severity of the situation, were relieved to see their daughter calm and happy. However, this calm did not last long. In late January, during an argument, Jack hit Ashley again and threw a candle and a TV remote at her while she was on a video call with her sister Haley, shortly after which Haley again begged her to come home. Ashley initially agreed but quickly changed her mind. She believed that somewhere inside that cruel man was still the charming boy she had known for years. She hoped that time, medicine, or her love could heal him. On the morning of February 1, 2022, Jack was angry with Ashley again. He told her to avoid him and secretly date someone else. He even demanded to see her phone and checked all of her social media. Just before 8 a.m., their neighbor, Helen Bortonshaw, heard Ashley screaming through their shared wall. A few minutes later, Ashley showed up at Jack's door. When Helen saw her, Ashley was barefoot, crying and had a bleeding cut on her palm. Ashley explained that Jack had caught her looking at nude photos of a woman and became angry. He verbally abused her, then punched and smashed her phone and threw her kitten against the wall. Although Ashley feared that Jack was trying to harm her, she asked Helen not to call the police. Helen agreed but urged Ashley to go with her to the doctor instead of going back to Jack's apartment. Ashley refused, so Helen decided to talk to Jack herself. Jack apologized for the previous incidents and remained calm, then Helen left to go to the appointment. At around 9 a.m., Ashley used Jack's cell phone to call her family. At that time, Ashley's mother knew about Jack's situation because Haley had revealed everything. Her parents quickly bought her a return ticket for February 3rd. When Ashley told Jack she was leaving, he agreed to go with her to the airport. Ashley's mother warned her to go straight to the airport if Jack attacked her again and warned him that she would contact the police if he harmed her daughter again. Ashley talked to her family for about 3 hours. When they ended the call, it was 11 a.m. in Chelmsford and 3 a.m. in Vernon. A few minutes later, Jack texted his mother, admitting that he had severely beaten Ashley, knocked her down, and possibly broken her arm. This occurred between 11:22 a.m. and 12:38 p.m. Ashley sent several text messages to family and friends from Jack's phone. Because it was dark, no one answered. She also texted her friends at the Chelmsford church, asking for help and describing the emergency. Unfortunately, these messages were not read until hours later, when it was too late to help. Between 12:38 and 12:45, Jack attacked Ashley by choking her until she stopped breathing. He then went into the kitchen. Jack took an 11-centimeter knife and stabbed Ashley in the chest and stomach about 100 times, killing her. After the brutal act, he changed his profile picture to a picture of him and Ashley, adding the caption, "Always mine." He recorded a video for Haley, expressing his love for Ashley, apologizing, admitting that he couldn't let her go and saying that he wasn't in the right mind. The video, which was never sent, shows Ashley's body lying next to him. While this was happening in England, Ashley's family in Vernon woke up to several messages from Ashley. They contacted Jamie Ashworth, a Mormon friend in Chelmsford. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another church acquaintance, went to Jack's apartment. After knocking on the door but getting no response, they called the police and left. Meanwhile, Ashley's best friend in Vernon noticed that Ashley's social media accounts were still active. In desperation, she sent a text message to Ashley. Messages from Ashley's family and friends continued to pour in, but Jack ignored them, even though they were eager to hear from her. Jack eventually called his sister Nadia. When she answered, he admitted to killing Ashley and even showed her the body. The incident happened at around 4:13 p.m. When the police entered the apartment after receiving Jamie's call, they arrived within 10 minutes. Unfortunately, it was too late. The police arrested Jack immediately. He was covered in blood and told the officers that he was psychotic, confessing to the crime. He was then taken to Chelmsford Prison. Jack Seppel's trial began on September 7, 2022, at Chelmsford Crown Court. Before the trial, Jack underwent a medical examination. A toxicology report found that he had a small amount of an illegal substance and a small amount of an antidepressant in his system. A psychiatric assessment concluded that he was fit to give evidence and stand trial. After considering the evidence against him, the court found that his guilt was clear. This evidence included a video recording of Jack confessing to the crime. Faced with this overwhelming evidence, Jack immediately pleaded guilty. The judge then informed him that, due to the seriousness of his actions and his subsequent confession, the only sentence he could receive was life imprisonment. During the trial, prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's lengthy criminal record, which dates back to 2014. It was the first time Ashley's parents had learned the true nature of their daughter's boyfriend. Jack had a history of multiple arrests for stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and violent assault. He had also been issued with a number of restraining orders against him by his mother and ex-girlfriend. The revelation of Jack's violent and brutal past shocked Ashley's parents, who were shocked to learn of the criminal record of the man who took their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense presented their views on a letter Jack sent to Ashley's family while he was in prison. In the letter, Jack expressed remorse for his actions. Judge Murray ruled that the letter could be made public, citing the importance of transparency in the justice system. In the letter, Jack addressed Ashley's entire family, especially her mother and sister, Haley. He acknowledged that no action could have undone the harm he had caused or lessened their suffering. Jack accepted responsibility for his actions and acknowledged that his mental state played a significant role in the tragedy. He also stated that he had openly discussed his mental health struggles with Ashley. After his trial, Jack Seppel was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 23 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of the Winkler family. Matthew Bryan Winkler was born on November 21, 1974, in Henderson, Tennessee. He was the youngest of 3 sons, with 2 older brothers, James and Daniel. Matthew's parents, Dan and Diane Winkler, were deeply religious and they raised their sons very strictly. It is worth noting that Matthew became a 5th-generation church pastor. His father, Uncle Michael, grandfather Wendell, great-grandfather Merlin Winkler and great-grandfather Merlin Paul Winkler Sr. have all been pastors of the gospel. Matthew grew up in a respected family. His father was the head of the local preacher's school and was a well-known figure in their hometown. As a result, Matthew and his brother attended Sunday school and actively participated in church activities. Outside of church, Matthew excelled in high school soccer, with many believing he had the potential to become a world-class athlete. As the head of the family frequently traveled for his preaching activities. He was often accompanied by his wife and children. As a result, their children, including Matthew, attended multiple schools during childhood. Despite this, he was an outgoing and friendly child who easily made friends in each new place. When Matthew finished high school, his family was living in Austin, Texas. He was a charismatic person but didn't excel academically. Following graduation, Matthew attended Freed-Hardeman College and graduated successfully. During his time at college, Matthew began developing his pastoral skills under his father's guidance. He served as the youth minister at the Central Church of Christ in McMinnville. He was later appointed as the preacher at the Church of Christ located on 4th Street in Selmer, Tennessee. Mary Carroll was born in December 1973 in G Township, Tennessee. She was the elder of 2 sisters, raised by parents who were deeply devoted to their Christian faith. In fact, her father was a pastor at the local church, where Mary and her younger sister attended Sunday school. A few years after Mary was born, Mary's parents had a second daughter. She was born prematurely and had serious health issues, including cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and intellectual disabilities. This was very challenging for her parents to accept, so they looked for different treatments and even tried experimental therapy to help her. Unfortunately, none of these treatments led to improvements in her health. Mary loved her younger sister dearly and always tried to care for her with kindness and compassion. In 1987, tragedy struck when Mary's 10-year-old sister suffered an epileptic seizure while bathing. Mary had briefly left the room to retrieve something from the bathing accessories, and by the time Mary returned, her sister was no longer breathing. Despite efforts to revive her sister, but she passed away. For Mary, a 13-year-old girl, this was a big shock and the first loss in her life. She was shaken. Consumed by guilt and self-blame, Mary struggled to cope with her grief and she had a nervous breakdown. Mary teachers, concerned about her well-being, referred her to the school psychologist. The therapy sessions were very effective, but they did not last long. When her father discovered the therapy sessions, he became outraged and forbade Mary from continuing, insisting that family problems should be kept within the family. Unfortunately, Mary never received real attention from her parents. Mary grew up as a shy and modest person. After her younger sister's tragic death, causing Mary to become increasingly withdrawn and struggled with the emotional trauma. Her father did not allow her to seek help from therapists, which led to serious psychological problems over time. Years later, Mary's parents decided to adopt a young girl named Charlotte from a troubled large family. Shortly after, they also welcomed Charlotte's 2 brothers and sister into their home, reuniting the siblings. As the older sibling, Mary took care of the younger children and helped her mother. Around the same time, Mary met Matthew, who had just graduated from high school. He was charming, handsome, and popular among girls. However, his strict religious upbringing prevented him from freely expressing his romantic feelings. Despite this, Mary and Matthew quickly hit it off, which soon blossomed into love. As their feelings grew deeper and deeper, they decided to take the next step. After a few months, they introduced each other to their parents, who gave their blessing. With their parents' approval, Mary and Matthew began planning their wedding, which took place in April 1994. When Matthew's family welcomed their first daughter, Patricia, his college education was temporarily postponed. To support his family, he worked at a construction site, but he only did it for a short time because he was not used to hard physical labor. This was when Mary began to notice that Matthew had a difficult temperament. He would often get angry over nothing, become easily irritated, and have trouble controlling his temper. Mary, a gentle and quiet young woman, decided not to speak out about the issues she faced, and instead she kept her family problems to herself. Mary, brought up in a patriarchal household, she had been taught to obey her husband without question. Initially, the Winklers lived close to Mary's parents, allowing her to visit them frequently. However, their lives took a turn for the worse when Mary's mother, Mrs. Freeman, was diagnosed with cancer. The disease progressed rapidly, and she passed away within a few months. This loss was another blow to Mary. Now she has the responsibility of taking care of her little siblings. Mary's situation became increasingly complex during this time, due to her second pregnancy. Following the birth of their second daughter, the family relocated to a new city, where they purchased a small home. After the move, Mary became fully devoted to caring for her baby, which led to her nearly ceasing communication with her father and younger siblings. Their constant need for attention overwhelmed her, which further strained their relationships. Additionally, Mary's struggling with severe postpartum depression. Those close to the Winkler family noticed changes in Mary's behavior and personality that seemed unusual and concerning. As an introverted person with sociophobic tendencies, she found it challenging to connect with others and form friendships. She gets upset easily, and any little thing can bring her to tears. During this period, as Matthew's career as a pastor progressed, Mary grew increasingly withdrawn. The situation further deteriorated when she became pregnant for the third time, and a few months later, discovered that the fetus had not survived, adding to her emotional pain. This news was devastating for Mary, who had been eagerly anticipating the arrival of this child. Several months earlier, Mary had been overjoyed when she finally became pregnant after a 2-year wait, signaled by the 2 long-awaited lines on her pregnancy test. However, Mary's happiness was tempered by fear, and she chose to keep her pregnancy a secret for a long time. Eventually, as her condition became more noticeable, people around her began speculating about her unusual behavior and private life. Those who knew Mary closely believed that her unusual behavior was due to the severe trauma she experienced in her childhood, which had taken a toll on her emotional well-being. Behind closed doors, Matthew and Mary's seemingly perfect marriage was far from ideal. Matthew would often shout and snap at his wife, Mary, for no apparent reason, much to the concern of their neighbors. Despite her efforts to maintain a facade of a happy marriage, the truth began to unravel when Mary appeared with a huge black eye. Although she claimed it was an accident, rumors quickly spread about the pastor's violent behavior towards his wife. The tension in their relationship worsened when Matthew had a growing desire to try new things in the bedroom, and he suggested to his wife that they experiment with role-playing, adult toys, and other activities. However, these ideas were met with strong disapproval from Mary. She had been raised in a conservative and strict family, found these ideas to be completely unacceptable. As a result, she firmly told Matthew that she would not engage in such activities. This led to Matthew becoming angry and frustrated, and he repeatedly attempted to force Mary to give in to his desires. The situation became increasingly unbearable for Mary, who suffered abuse from her husband in the bedroom. She eventually confided in her closest friend, tearfully sharing her struggles and asking for kept confidential. Unfortunately, her friend knew the promise and instead shared the information with others. The incident led to widespread rumors about the pastor's behavior, Matthew, damaging his reputation within the community. At that time, Matthew is being promoted and desires to become a local church leader. Nevertheless, his aspirations were dashed due to the swift spread of unflattering rumors about him. Matthew suffered further consequences, was dismissed from Sunday school, where he had previously been in good standing and had successfully taught God's word to the children. The decision was prompted by complaints from parents who had also heard about the pastor's strange hobbies. Matthew. As a result, the family Matthew had to move house there and relocate to a different city in search of a fresh start. They eventually settled in Selmer, where soon gained the affection and respect of the people around them. Matthew resumed his role as a church pastor, while his wife, Mary, took on a part-time job to help supplement the family's income. Although their family is not yet peaceful, Mary and Matthew presented themselves as an ideal couple, making their family seem like a model to their neighbors and church congregation. They had become close friends with a young married couple who lived next door, often visiting and sharing holidays, news, and secrets. A few months before the tragedy happened, during a dinner at their house, Mary proudly told their friends that Matthew had bought her a gun for self-defense. He had already taken her to the shooting range several times to teach her how to use it. Mary turned out to be a quick learner, mastering the skills and accurately hitting her targets. It was discovered that the Winkler already had firearms in their home. These guns had been previously purchased by Matthew for self-defense. The guests found it puzzling that he and Mary needed so many firearms, given that they lived in a peaceful town where they had no known enemies and were well respected by everyone. Mary and Matthew faced financial difficulties after moving to a new house. Mary began looking for part-time work and also pursued a medical degree in order to secure a job at a clinic and care for sick children. Mary then decided to commit financial fraud in an attempt to improve her family's financial situation. She claimed she didn't realize her actions were illegal and intended to repay the money once her finances improved. Specifically, she inflated her bank accounts by adding false funds. Mary received checks from unknown sources, totaling almost $177,000, and deposited them into a joint account with her husband. Her substantial deposits caught the attention of bank employees, and they invited Mary and Matthew to the bank branch to discuss and clarify the transactions. Mary and Matthew failed to appear at the bank, which heightened the suspicions. It was initially assumed that Matthew was unaware of his wife's actions. On March 22, 2006, the quiet town of Selmer, Tennessee, was shaken by a shocking crime. The body of 31-year-old pastor Matthew Winkler was found in his home, a victim of murder. The news became even more alarming as it was discovered that Matthew's wife, Mary, and their 3 young daughters, 8-year-old Patricia, 6-year-old Maria Eliza, and 1-year-old Brianna, had mysteriously disappeared. Matthew's absence from the evening church service at Christ Cathedral was very unusual. As a responsible person, he usually informed others if there were any changes to his plans, so his failure to attend was suspicious. The situation became more alarming when numerous phone calls to his family's home went unanswered. The neighbors decided to go to Matthew's house to find out what had happened and if they needed any help. From the outside, the house appeared normal, the windows and doors were intact, and there was nothing suspicious. Inside, there were lights on in several rooms, and they could hear a rather loud television coming from one room. This shows that the homeowner is probably busy doing their own thing, but no one answered when they knocked on the front door. The door was locked, and subsequent phone calls also went unanswered. It was impossible for them to see inside through the curtained windows, leaving them unsure if anyone was actually present. Even though the situation appeared unusual, the neighbors did not call the police. Instead, they called an elder in the community, and he suggested finding a spare key to open the door. It took an additional hour and a half to find a key, but once they entered, they encountered a strange and unsettling atmosphere. The interior of the house was perfectly intact, with no signs of forced entry, but the owners were missing. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but this sense of normalcy changed when they entered the master bedroom. In Matthew and Mary's bedroom, they witnessed a horrifying sight. The pastor's Matthew body lay on the floor, in a large pool of blood. A massive gunshot wound had torn through his back, with blood splatters covering the surrounding area and dried, bloody foam on his face. The body had stiffened, indicating that it had been lying there for many hours. Matthew was still dressed in his pajamas, suggesting that he was likely shot in the morning. It was not until this time that the police officially received a call reporting this tragic incident. By the time the police arrived, a large crowd had gathered around the house, including neighbors, church members, and people passing by. However, the presence of this crowd caused big problems for the investigation. As they stood around, they unknowingly left behind fingerprints and inadvertently damaged or destroyed evidence, making it much harder for investigators to do their job. The police took the victim's, Matthew's body for a forensic examination, which revealed that he was shot once in the back with a large caliber gun. The wound caused massive blood loss, leading to his death just a few minutes later. Sadly, he was unable to call for help before succumbing to his injuries. It was impossible to confirm whether any strangers were in the house during the crime because the evidence was damaged by those who came before the police. The crime scene was unusual, and key witnesses seemed to have vanished. The whereabouts of the wife and daughters of Matthew remained a mystery. The police suspected that Mary and children might have been kidnapped or possibly murdered. In addition to their disappearance, the family's minivan was also missing from the garage. A large-scale search operation was initiated, prompting a yellow alert from the state, which signaled that children were missing. As a result, all citizens were asked to remain vigilant and assist in locating them. Mary's disappearance raised suspicions when her husband, Matthew, was found murdered in their home. Authorities worried that Mary and daughters might also be in danger and issued a notice searching for them. At first, police believed Mary was a victim due to her timid personality. However, as they dug deeper and collected more evidence, including financial information and witness statements from neighbors, the focus shifted, and Mary became the primary suspect in her husband's murder investigation, Matthew. It was essential to locate Mary as soon as possible and determine the whereabouts of the children, ensuring their safety. The family and their vehicle were immediately added to the missing list. Authorities also attempted to track Mary's bank card transactions and locate her using her mobile phone signal. Mary was discovered the next day in a resort town in Alabama, where she and her children were enjoying themselves at a local amusement park. It seemed as though she wanted to give her children a final, memorable experience, possibly because she knew she would soon be facing prison time. When the family was questioned at the police station, the two older daughters recounted the story with confidence. They explained that intruders had broken into their house, injured their father, and their mother had used a gun to protect them. They were then forced to flee to save their lives. According to the girls, their father was recovering in the hospital, and they expected to visit him soon and then return home. Patricia and Maria Eliza did not witness the incident that occurred in their house. Instead, they learned about them from their mother's account, Mary. All they knew was that they heard a gunshot and caught a glimpse of their father lying on the floor. Their mother quickly put them in the car and they drove away from the scene. Although Mary initially confessed, but then she stated that she couldn't recall the entire sequence of incident due to a temporary lapse in memory. Mary alleged that her husband, Matthew, had been emotionally and physically abusing her for years. He would often humiliate her and coerced her into having sex according to his will. Mary claimed it was Matthew who initially conceived the financial scam, and she only did as he said. Matthew was known to have a short temper, would become enraged easily, and had a history of physical violence. His former secretary corroborated these allegations, stating that she frequently saw Matthew yell at his wife, who would bring him lunch at church, but he would always find fault with something she did. The evening before the murder, a heated argument broke out between Mary and her husband, Matthew, resulting in them spending the night in separate rooms. Mary was distraught and spent the entire night crying. The next morning, still distraught, she inadvertently picked up the loaded shotgun her husband kept in the house. With the gun in hand, she went to Matthew's room and shot him in the back while he was still in bed. He collapsed to the floor, bleeding profusely and gasping for air. He tried to speak and managed to whisper a single question to Mary, "Why?" In response, she simply said, "Sorry, so sorry." Mary then took her daughters and left the house. Despite his attempt to call for help by reaching for the phone, Matthew didn't have the strength to make the call. The murder weapon was discovered in the trunk of the car Mary had used to transport the children. It remains unclear why she took it with her. At the trial, Mary was unable to provide an explanation. A key piece of evidence presented at the trial was the role-playing costumes found at Mary's residence. These pieces of evidence proved that Matthew had forced his sexual desires on his wife and how he had abused her. Mary's reaction upon seeing the costumes was striking. She initially turned pale and then became hysterical. Despite providing multiple, conflicting accounts of the events, the court ultimately concluded that she was a victim of domestic abuse. The court found that Mary's years of accumulated feelings of anger, resentment, and pain eventually led to the murder. Despite acknowledging her history of abuse, the court still held Mary accountable for her actions. In April 2007, the court reached its final decision. Mary Winkler was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but her mental state at the time has caused much controversy. Initially, it was anticipated that Mary would face a minimum prison sentence of 6 years. However, she was ultimately sentenced to less than 1 year. A portion of this sentence, Mary spent 2 months in a psychiatric hospital where experts evaluated her mental fitness to regain custody of her children. Upon Mary's release in summer 2008, she was given custody of her daughter, who had been living with their paternal grandparents. However, Matthew's parents were outraged by this decision, as they firmly believed Mary was responsible for their son's death and felt Mary hadn't received an adequate punishment. They were further distressed by the thought of their granddaughter being cared for by the woman they thought had intentionally killed their son. Despite multiple attempts to appeal the custody decision, they were unsuccessful. Meanwhile, the fraud case against Mary was dropped, as the bank chose not to file formal charges and pursued the matter no further. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lucy Davis. Lucy Davis was born in 1971 in the picturesque town of Penimpryd, Wales. Her childhood was filled with love and warmth, thanks to her parents, Roger and Andre, who created a happy and comfortable home. Lucy grew up in the beautiful village of Glenk with her younger sister, Anna. Lucy took her first steps surrounded by majestic mountains and enchanting forests. Her kind nature and charming smile make her stand out, becoming a dynamic and special individual among those around her. Lucy easily gained the sympathy of her teachers and classmates. She developed a passion for horseback riding at a young age and had an endless love for horses. Seeing how eager Lucy was, her father arranged for her and her younger sister to take horse riding lessons with experienced instructors. They mastered the basics of this noble art, conquering challenges and overcoming obstacles. Lucy and Anna became skilled horse riders. Lucy Davis had a wonderful childhood in Wales, surrounded by the beauty of nature and the love of family and community, which helped her grow and develop. Lucy and Anna developed a passion for horse riding, which not only brought them companions but also taught them valuable life skills such as discipline, self-control, and responsibility. Their talent and perseverance earned them recognition at prestigious competitions, where they won multiple awards. However, Lucy's interests extended beyond horse riding. With a curious mind and a desire for knowledge, Lucy explored other passions, including music. She took flute and piano lessons, diligently honing her skills, and within a year, she had mastered both instruments, captivating audiences with her performances. This led to her joining the Glamorgan Youth Orchestra, where she continued to refine her musical talents. Lucy also participates in the school choir, which allows her to express her creativity and love of music. Lucy Davis's childhood was a balance of fun and dedication, marked by hard work and eager to learn. These qualities formed a strong base that would support her future successes and help her become an extraordinary person. In high school, Lucy became close friends with Garrick Jenkinson, a quiet and enigmatic young man from Wales. Despite not knowing much about his background, but they developed a strong and lasting connection. Garrett and Lucy became closer friends as time passed. However, Garrett secretly harbored romantic feelings for Lucy. After graduating from high school in 1998, Lucy pursued her passion for music and enrolled at the University of Yorkshire in Northern England. She initially aspired to become a music teacher but later realized her true desire was to create art in a major city. This realization led Lucy to meet Grimmy McAllister, whose perspective and humor aligned with hers. As their connection grew, Lucy introduced Grimmy to her parents, Roger and Andre. The introduction was a success, and Lucy's parents saw Grimmy as an ideal partner for their daughter. After careful consideration, Lucy and Grimmy chose to live together and start a family. In 1995, while in college, the couple had a son named James and Anne. To care for their child, Lucy took a break from her studies, while Grimmy continued his education and worked night shifts at the postal sorting department to support their family. Despite the challenges she faced, Lucy was hopeful about their future, driven by her love for her family and her aspirations for a better life. However, spending months at home with the baby took a toll on her, and she began to feel lonely. The fact that she and Grimmy rarely spent time together, due to his night shifts, made the problem even worse. Seeking companionship and someone to talk to, Lucy created a social media account under the nickname Miseria. This virtual outlet allowed her to share her experiences and connect with others. One user in particular caught her attention, Harold Landry, a 53 years old, he from Louisiana who had grown up in poverty and was fixated on achieving independence and success. Harold put in a lot of work and eventually came to an important insight. He understood that real wealth came not from owning oil wells, but from providing the essential tools and machinery needed to keep them running. With this insight, he founded a company that specializes in manufacturing hydraulic equipment for major oil companies in the southern United States. As his business thrived, Harold's fortunes grew, earning him not only financial security but also prestige and, eventually, the status of a billionaire. For Lucy, conversing with Harold was invigorating. She was captivated by his life experiences, dedication, and generosity. However, their relationship was not without its challenges. The significant gaps in their age, social standing, and lifestyle often caused friction between them. When Harold and Lucy first met, Harold's life seemed to be a confusing combination of luxury in many different experiences. He indulged in unusual hobbies, acquired luxury items, and owned real estate on KML Island in Mexico. There is no information about his previous marriages. He was married and divorced twice, but it is not known whether he had children from these marriages. Harold's life underwent a major transformation in 1992. Following his second divorce, he met Geraldine, a woman 20 years his junior, born in 1966 and originally from Mexico. At the time, Geraldine was married to Chris Price and had 2 children. Despite Geraldine being married, but Harold successfully captured her heart. On February 6, 1994, Harold planned a romantic dinner for Geraldine in New Orleans. They employed Christian Hurton as a babysitter for their children, giving them the opportunity to enjoy a romantic evening by themselves, free from childcare responsibilities. After dinner, Harold walked Geraldine home and then offered to drive Christian home as a thank you. Unbeknownst to Harold, Chris Price, Geraldine's husband, had been monitoring the couple's secret affair. Chris, who was watching from his car, decided to confront Harold. He chased after him, finally catching up at a red light. Chris rushed towards Harold, shouting accusations. Harold remained calm, pulled out a gun, and warned Chris to back off. Enraged, Chris dared Harold to shoot. Without hesitation, Harold fired, hitting Chris in the neck. Fortunately, Chris received prompt medical treatment from a nearby hospital, and which saved his life. In 1997, Harold was tried in St. Mary Parish Court for the attempted murder of Chris Price. His lawyer, Pete Fannin, argued that Harold was a victim of a setup. The jury found Harold guilty of aggravated assault with a weapon, and he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. However, after appealing, Harold was released on parole, required to pay a fine and perform community service. Harold was thankful to Pete for his assistance and they formed a friendship. Harold and Chris reached a settlement, but the details of the compensation were kept private. Harold then lived in Covington as a wealthy man, openly discussing his past with Lucy, including his previous failed marriages and a traumatic incident. Lucy became more attracted to Harold after he shared his secrets. She was captivated by his persuasive nature. After Lucy ended her relationship with Grimmy, she and Harold chose to start dating. To shield them from unwanted issues, Harold aimed to steer clear of trouble. In early 2000, Harold visited England to meet Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre. Although they were initially surprised by the age gap, they supported their daughter's decision and didn't meddle in the relationship. Harold gave Lucy many costly presents because he wanted to fulfill all her wishes. His love was intense, and he contemplated marriage, but wanted everything to be flawless. Harold plans a trip to Mexico to strengthen his relationship, inviting Lucy, her son James, and her ex-husband Grimmy to join them on this special journey. Mexico was a paradise for Harold, and having his friend and lawyer Pete's apartment nearby added to the trip's comfort. Harold had recently bought a diamond engagement ring and shared the news with Pete. However, Pete suspected Lucy was cheating on Harold due to her frequent meetings with Grimmy. Despite Pete's warnings, Harold proposed to Lucy, blinded by his love for her. She accepted his proposal. In mid-2003, Harold and Lucy got married. Harold purchased $1 million home in Warshire County, and they started a new life together. Their neighbors, Rachel Clark and Stephen Kennedy, were friendly and helped them feel welcome in the area. After the wedding, Lucy gave birth to a daughter named Hearth. Harold also welcomed James, Lucy's son from her previous marriage, into their family and treated him as his own. Over time, Lucy and Harold's relationship began to deteriorate. Harold became increasingly controlling, expecting Lucy to obey him completely. However, Lucy was an independent person and refused to comply with Harold's demands. As a result, arguments and disagreements became more frequent, creating a tense atmosphere at home. Their son, James, had a difficult and unhappy childhood due to his family's stressful environment. Lucy and Harold's relationship was deteriorating, and their neighbors took notice. The situation was made worse by their growing reliance on alcohol, which added to their existing problems. However, when the arguing and shouting stopped, neighbors thought the couple was trying to resolve their issues. In 2009, Lucy reconnected with her old school friend Garrett on social media. Their online conversations became a source of comfort for Lucy during a difficult time in her life. As Harold sensed Lucy's growing distance, he realized she was seeking solace in another man. Not wanting to confront the situation, Harold left for Mexico, leaving Lucy alone. During his absence, Lucy invited Garrett to visit. Harold was surprised when he got home. Shortly after, Lucy filed for divorce. And Harold began an affair with their neighbor, Rachel. Harold and Lucy's divorce proceedings were complicated by disagreements over dividing their assets. Lucy wanted to keep the family home for the sake of their children, while Harold was adamant that they sell it and offered her a financial settlement instead. The situation between Lucy and Harold became increasingly heated, and Lucy revealed some of Harold's past secrets. When Lucy returns home, the arguments continue, and the tension between her and Harold causes Jameson and Harth much suffering. On the evening of Monday, February 1, 2010, Harold was drinking wine when a package intended for his neighbor, Stephen Kennedy, was mistakenly delivered to his address. Later that evening, around 9 p.m., Stephen stopped by Harold's house to collect his package after noticing the delivery notification. Upon arriving, Stephen was greeted by Harold, then Harold offered him a glass of wine. Although Harold had already been drinking and was visibly intoxicated, Stephen accepted the offer. After a brief visit, during which he collected his package and exchanged greetings with Lucy, and Stephen left. Harold and Lucy's argument soon resumed, this time centering on Lucy's plans to buy furniture for her new home. James rushed into the kitchen after hearing a commotion and witnessed Harold physically abusing his mother with a kitchen utensil. James immediately called the police and comforted his younger sister. Meanwhile, Lucy grabbed the children and attempted to escape the house, heading to Stephen's residence in search of help. However, Harold caught up with her during the escape and violently attacked her with a knife, stabbing her in the chest. He then dragged her body under a nearby bush, attempting to conceal the crime. Upon hearing the screams, Stephen rushed outside and discovered Lucy's lifeless body. Initially, he thought she had fainted, but soon realized the gravity of the situation. Police officer Steve C. Fox arrived at the crime scene and immediately called for an ambulance. He then began searching the neighborhood for Harold, but unfortunately, he was unable to find Harold. The children, traumatized and frightened, hid in the house until the police arrived. A tragic incident drastically altered the family's life, leading to a prolonged and challenging struggle for justice. An ambulance quickly arrived and transported Lucy to Yorkshire Hospital, but unfortunately, she succumbed after to the hospital. At the same time, a fearful Harold knocked on his friend Rachel's door, his voice shaking. He confessed to doing something terrible, but didn't reveal what it was. Harold then gave Rachel a large sum of money, $40,000, along with all his cash, car keys, and paychecks. After that, he headed home. Meanwhile, the police were searching for Harold. They scoured the streets, interviewed witnesses, but he seemed to have vanished. However, luck eventually turned in the detectives' favor, and Harold was arrested on his way back from Rachel's house. His face, filled with fear and remorse, was telling. Lucy's family, including her parents Roger and Andre, were overcome with grief. In a statement to the press, they expressed their profound sorrow at the loss of their daughter and chose not to make any additional comments. The forensic examination confirmed that Lucy died from multiple stab wounds to the chest. The investigation relied heavily on evidence discovered at the crime scene and a key eyewitness account from James, Lucy's son, who saw the tragic event unfold. February 24, 2011, was a day of tension in the courtroom, as everyone waited anxiously for the verdict in the trial of 64-year-old Harold Landry, who was accused of murdering his 38-year-old wife, Lucy. The jury had just delivered their guilty verdict, and the air was thick with bitterness and loss. Harold should have been Lucy's rock and protector, stood accused of her murder. His lawyer and friend, Pete, had passed the case to experienced attorney Andy Child, who faced an uphill battle in defending Harold. The defense's task was to convince the court that Harold never intended to take Lucy's life. The defense claimed that Harold acted in response to Lucy's aggressive behavior. Overcome with emotion, Harold swore he loved his wife and was consumed by remorse, insisting he never meant to hurt her. As part of his defense strategy, he pleaded guilty to manslaughter in connection with Lucy's death. However, the prosecution presented damning evidence, including disturbing photographs of multiple wounds on Lucy's body. The brutality of Harold's attack left no doubt about his guilt. After a thorough review of the evidence, the court delivered its verdict. Harold Landry was found guilty of Lucy's death and sentenced to life in prison. He must serve 16 years before being eligible for parole, at which point he will be 82 years old. The story of Harold and Lucy is a tragic love story. Although the trial is over, the consequences of this tragedy still linger. Lucy's parents, Roger and Andre, felt that the verdict was fair, but it did not alleviate their grief. Meanwhile, Harold Landry maintained his innocence and vowed to appeal the decision. He claimed that he would not change anything, even with the benefit of hindsight. Harold has been held accountable for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jolene Cummings. Jolene Cummings, a 34-year-old mother of 3, lived in Fernandina Beach and was going through a divorce from her husband, Jason. As part of their arrangement, Jason would pick up the children on weekends from their home in Fernandina Beach, where Jolene lived with them. Jolene worked as a hairdresser at Tangle's Hair Salon. On Saturday, May 12, 2018, she worked until 5 p.m. The next day was Mother's Day and also her 34th birthday. According to their plan, Jolene was supposed to meet Jason in the parking lot of the Winn-Dixie supermarket in Hilliard on Sunday to pick up the children. However, Jolene failed to show up, and Jason was unable to reach her by phone. Jolene's mother, Ann Johnson, also tried to contact her to wish her a happy birthday, but all her calls went straight to voicemail. Jason eventually called and to ask if she knew why Jolene hadn't arrived to pick up the children. Jolene failed to pick up her children, which was unusual behavior for her. Concerned, Ann reported Jolene missing to the police on Monday, May 14th, after being unable to contact Jolene. The police immediately launched an investigation and issued a missing person poster with Jolene's photo. They also put out an alert for her 2006 Ford Expedition. On the same day, police and volunteers searched the forest area near Jolene's home but found nothing. The police learned that Jolene was last seen leaving work at the Tangle's Salon on Saturday, May 12. The salon's owner reported that Jolene and her coworker, Jennifer, had closed the salon together at 5 p.m. that day. According to Jennifer, they had each gotten into their own cars and driven away separately after work. The police discovered that Jolene's last phone activity was an outgoing call made while she was still at work on May 12. The police were determined to find a lead and began scrutinizing Jolene's personal life. They focused on her ex-boyfriend Jason, as spouses often turn against each other during divorce and custody battles. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered that 5 days before Jolene vanished, a neighbor reported a loud argument at Jolene's residence. The dispute was between Jolene and Jason, with their children present. Jason had asked Jolene to let him stay with her temporarily, but she refused, knowing the police were searching for him for violating his parole. In a fit of rage, Jason began destroying property. By the time the police arrived, Jason had seemingly escaped, but the truth was unclear. After Jolene disappeared, the police began to focus on Jason as a person of interest in her disappearance. On the second day of the investigation, May 15, 2018, several significant events unfolded. The police discovered Jason hiding in Jolene's house, where he had been since the day Jolene's neighbor reported a loud argument to the authorities. He was subsequently arrested and taken to the police station for questioning. During the interrogation, Jason claimed to have no involvement in Jolene's disappearance. Meanwhile, the police found a crucial lead. Jolene's SUV was discovered parked outside a Home Depot hardware store, just a few miles from her workplace. The vehicle showed no signs of damage or struggle. After a 2-day break, Jolene's salon reopened on May 15. At 10 a.m., the police visited the salon to speak with Jennifer Sibbert, the last person to see Jolene before the weekend. However, Jennifer didn't show up for work, claiming she had an urgent matter to attend to in another city. Thanks to CCTV footage, investigators made a breakthrough in Jolene's disappearance. The footage revealed Jolene's car entering the parking lot of a hardware store, where it was later found by the police. Notably, Jennifer had claimed that she and Jolene closed the salon together at 5 p.m. on May 12, but the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car arriving at the hardware store at 1:17 a.m. on May 13, a gap of 8 hours and 17 minutes. At a press conference, Sheriff Bill Liepert explained that the CCTV footage showed Jolene's car parking at 1:17 a.m. on Sunday. The video showed the driver waiting for a few minutes before getting out. But instead of seeing Jolene exit the car, the footage surprisingly showed Jennifer Sibbert, the same hairdresser who claimed to be the last person to see Jolene. After leaving Jolene's car, Jennifer went to the gas station across the street. The gas station footage shows Jennifer entering the store, where she purchased a bottle of water and requested that an employee call her a taxi. The taxi was later confirmed to have taken her to her workplace, a salon. According to the gas station employee, Jennifer appeared to be annoyed and had visible, fresh abrasions on her face. As a result, Jennifer Sibbert became the primary suspect in the investigation, and the police began searching for her. However, the address she had provided on her job application was found to be fake. Despite her attempts to hide, Jennifer was eventually found. On May 16, police officers spotted her black Kia Soul parked between two trucks in a recreation area, just 50 meters from the salon. Upon approaching the vehicle, the officers discovered Jennifer sleeping inside. Jennifer Sibbert was arrested and initially charged with stealing a car belonging to Jolene Cummings. When police brought her in for questioning, they noticed abrasions on her hands and face and asked her to explain them. She claimed she had been bitten by bed bugs. Further investigation revealed that she was homeless, often sleeping in her car and using a local fitness center shower. As investigators dug deeper, they made a surprising discovery that Jennifer Sibbert was not her real name. In fact, she was actually Kimberly Kessler, born in 1968 and reported missing in Pennsylvania in 2012. It turned out that she had been using the identity of Jennifer Marie Sibbert, a 13-year-old girl who had died in a car accident in Germany in 1987 and was buried in Pennsylvania. The investigation into Kimberly Kessler's case revealed a trail of deception dating back to 1996, when she began using stolen identities. At that time, she was living in Pennsylvania. Since then, Kessler has assumed at least 18 different identities and lived in 33 cities across 14 states. Many of these aliases bear similar names, which she often obtained by stealing names from gravestones and cemeteries. The police charged Kimberly Kessler with forgery after discovering she had been using fake names. A search of a storage unit she rented uncovered several suspicious items, including 4 wigs, a bag containing 2 cut-off hair tails, and 3 mobile phones. However, the most significant evidence was the discovery of Jolene Cummings's DNA on Kessler's sock and shoe. Additionally, Scissors found in Kessler's car also contained Jolene's DNA. A review of Kessler's phone search history revealed that Kessler was preparing for Jolene's disappearance, which was not an accident. 2 weeks before Jolene vanished on May 12, Kessler searched for information on murder cases, including a query about a man who was charged with murder after his co-worker's remains were found in his yard. She also searched for information on co-workers who had been found guilty of murder, even when the victim's body had not been found. Kessler's search history also included queries about how to use a tourniquet, as well as information on female murderers in Florida and autopsy procedures. Furthermore, she searched for information on post-mortem changes, which suggests that she was trying to learn about what happens to the body after death. These search queries are particularly suspicious in light of a discovery made by the owner of the hair salon where Jolene worked. The owner reported that the plant in the salon had been replaced, which may be connected to Kessler's search for information on how to dispose of a body. On May 13, the day Jolene failed to pick up her kids, Kessler conducted internet searches at 12:05 p.m. for indoor palm and then at 12:06 p.m. for variation palm tree. The police analyzed CCTV footage from a nearby home goods store and found that Kessler visited the store on May 14 at 2:39 p.m. and left 30 minutes later with a palm plant, which was later found at the Tangles hair salon. Kessler's online searches continued, with Jolene Cummings I Have Vanished on May 15 at 6:13 p.m. and No Body No Crime on May 16 at 6:27 p.m. Forensic experts used luminol and ultraviolet light to examine the hair salon and discovered evidence of a serious crime, as the room glowed under the testing. On May 22, the sheriff announced during a press conference that they had gathered sufficient evidence to conclude that Jolene Cummings was dead, although some evidence was being withheld to protect the investigation. Further investigation revealed that Jolene had expressed concerns about her co-worker Jennifer, the new hairdresser, to another employee at the Tangles salon, stating that Jennifer seemed suspicious and was hiding something. This conversation took place about a week before Jolene's disappearance. Witnesses reported that Jolene and Jennifer had a tense relationship, and one person even saw them arguing on May 9, just 3 days before Jolene vanished. The Tangles hair salon eventually closed on June 5, 2018. The hair salon footage shows of Kessler visiting the dumpster at least 4 times. In the first footage, taken shortly after midnight, Kessler is seen doing something near the dumpster. At 8:08 a.m., she returns to throw away a heavy-looking white garbage bag. 14 minutes later, she disposes of another similar bag. The final footage, taken an hour before midnight, shows Kessler lifting a waste container to empty its contents, suggesting it also holds something heavy. The Walmart security footage revealed what Kessler had thrown away in the dumpster. The video showed her purchasing items at the self-checkout, including garbage bags, cleaning supplies, latex gloves, and an electric knife. This discovery led the police to investigate further. They found that a local waste management company was taking trash to a landfill in Georgia. In July 2018, nearly 200 people searched the landfill for a week, but the sheriff did not disclose what they found, citing the ongoing investigation. Near the dumpster where Kessler disposed of the white garbage bags, the police discovered a piece of jewelry, women's shoes, and a blue plastic container that matched one found in Kessler's storage unit. The container contained Jolene Cummings's DNA. Although Jolene's body was not found, the police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kessler for her murder. Kessler's first court appearance was on January 17, 2019, where she pleaded not guilty. However, the trial was delayed for several years due to concerns about Kessler's sanity. She went on a hunger strike, losing significant weight, and her court appearances often ended in outbursts of anger. In 2021, Kessler underwent mandatory treatment before the court session, and she was eventually deemed competent to stand trial. During a press conference, Sheriff Leeper made a statement, saying that they were sending Kessler to Florida State Prison, where she would spend the rest of her life. Sadly, Jolene Cummings's body has never been recovered or found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner, and they became inseparable after he invited her to prom. While their love was palpable, their significant age difference raised concerns. Despite this, their parents did not intervene in their relationship. As time passed, the Roden and Wagner families grew close, often spending weekends and attending parties together. The young couple's love was carefree and passionate. When Hannah turned 15, she revealed her pregnancy, which thrilled Jake. He expected his family to be delighted with the news, as they valued tradition and family lineage. The Wagners saw the baby as a way to continue their family name, which was passed down through generations. In contrast, the Rodens had a more modest approach to family, but still prioritized their children. Hannah's parents, Christopher and Dana, remained devoted to their 3 kids despite their divorce. The Roden family's income was modest, unlike the Wagners. To celebrate Sophie's birthday, a grand party was organized shortly after. Jake proposed that Hannah move in with him and his family, claiming it would make life easier for both of them. However, Hannah refused, having come to realize that Jake was trying to control her and limit her independence. This was partly due to Jake's increasing aggression and suspicious behavior, which had already led to physical altercations on several occasions. Hannah's rejection sparked tension between the Wagners, with each of Sophie's parents determined to gain full custody of Sophie. Driven by their own interests, the families began to advocate for their own rights. Jake's anger towards Hannah peaked when she refused to sign a document granting him and his brother full custody. He even threatened her, accusing her of hiding secrets. The situation escalated when Hannah announced her second pregnancy. Although she claimed the child was fathered by another man, Jake was skeptical. In December 2015, he hacked into Hannah's social media accounts to uncover evidence of infidelity, but found none. Instead, he discovered her communication with Georgia Ford's former mother-in-law, which sparked his interest. A court case was soon to follow as a result. During a court hearing to decide where their granddaughter Sophie would live, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III got into a serious argument. This dispute marked the beginning of the end for the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon became convinced that Hannah, Sophie's mother, was an obstacle and that they needed to eliminate her and the entire Roden family, who could potentially gain custody of Sophie. This disturbing idea evolved into a sinister plan by Christmas 2016. While many people were celebrating the festive season with love and kindness, the Wagners held a chilling family vote to decide whether to carry out their plan. Every family member agreed to go ahead, and they began assigning roles and making preparations. Over the next 5 months, they secretly observed the Roden homes, studying their daily routines, work schedules, and surveillance cameras. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III visited Christopher Roden under the guise of offering him a job to improve his finances. This was just a ruse to get into the house. The next evening, around 8 p.m., Christopher Roden Sr. answered the door, unaware of the danger lurking. Earlier that day, Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, had stopped by Christopher's trailer to care for the family's animals, as she did daily since he had offered her a job. However, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual at that time of day. Alarmed, she called emergency services, reporting what she saw and requesting help at 477 Union Hill Road. Panicked, Bobby rushed to the neighboring homes of relatives, loudly knocking on their doors. At one of the homes, she found a 3-year-old boy, Clarence's son, who didn't respond to her questions about his parents' whereabouts, only pointing towards the bed. Following the incident, the surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear, and the police advised the Roden relatives to take precautions and warned all Pike residents to stay indoors at night. After a brutal mass murder shocked the state, the public demanded a swift and transparent investigation, urging authorities to catch the perpetrators as soon as possible. In response, businessman Jeff Ruby offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. However, he later withdrew the offer. An investigative task force of at least 100 individuals was formed to work on the case. Following the funerals, investigators took possession of the slain family's 3 trailers and several vehicles, transporting them to a secure facility to preserve evidence and protect the victims' belongings. The plan was to return the family's cars and farming equipment to their relatives after the investigation. Forensic experts joined the inquiry, meticulously examining the trailers, but no suspect DNA was found. Although cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, they had been disabled, leaving no useful footage. The perpetrators had clearly planned every detail carefully. Just when it seemed like there were no significant leads, detectives made a breakthrough discovery. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes. In one location, police found around 200 cannabis plants, leading them to suspect the drugs were being grown for sale, not personal use. This raised questions about potential involvement with Mexican drug traffickers, but the amount of cannabis found was too small to imply involvement with an entire cartel. A relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking in January 2017, but this was considered a coincidence. Leonard Manley, the father of Dana Roden, denied his daughter's involvement in the cannabis operation, saying that they were trying to drag Dana through the mud, and he didn't like it. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale operation. The theory that a family feud over illegally obtained money was behind the murders was also disproven. At the Rodens' property, authorities discovered not only banned substances, but also specialized equipment used for breeding fighting chickens and cages containing animals trained for combat. Although these findings initially led investigators to suspect illegal animal fights might be connected to the homicide, it soon became apparent that this was not the case. Despite months of investigation, the true motive behind the crime remained a mystery. By April 13, 2017, local authorities officially announced that they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. However, prosecutor Rob Young insisted that the investigation was still active, implying that they had some promising leads that they were not yet ready to reveal. As the second anniversary of the mass crime approached, the case received little attention from the local media, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attended the memorial service, leading the community to suspect that the investigation had stalled. On May 12, 2017, a surprising turn of events occurred when a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, just 10 miles from the scene of the crime. Initially, they were looking for suspects, but it was later revealed that their true intention was to gather evidence. Additionally, detectives searched a house in Adams County that had previously belonged to Jake Wagner, although he had already sold it by that time. Approximately a month later, on June 20, 2017, the focus of the investigation officially shifted towards the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims, were under scrutiny. The Wagners had moved to Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area, claiming to have loved the Roden family and stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior, it wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving Jake had hacked into Hannah's account during the examination of the Wagner family's devices. Search queries related to guardianship were discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased sneakers for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime. The tread pattern of one of these matched that found in one of the trailers. Officers believed Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executive. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons, who were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were arrested and charged with perjury and obstructing justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a document related to Sophie's guardianship. She struck a plea deal to avoid imprisonment. The charges against Frida Wagner were later dropped in June 2019. The other Wagners refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any involvement in the Rodens' deaths, expressing sorrow and wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. However, in April 2021, 5 years after the incident, Jake Wagner decided to make a deal with the prosecution. Under the agreement, he would provide details of the crime in exchange for life sentences for all family members instead of the death penalty. Jake Wagner Jr. admitted to killing 5 people and pleaded guilty to 23 criminal charges, including aggravated murder, burglary, conspiracy, and other crimes. To ensure his daughter Hannah wouldn't be taken away, he thought killing her mother was the only solution. He believed that if he didn't also kill the Rodens, they would seek revenge and fight for custody of Hannah. Angela, who had been involved in the conspiracy, pleaded guilty to several charges on September 10th, including conspiracy, robbery, and evidence tampering. In exchange for her cooperation, the charge of murder was dropped. She received a 30-year prison sentence. George Wagner IV went on trial on August 28, 2022. Despite denying any involvement in the crimes, claiming he was unaware of what was happening, the prosecution presented evidence of his role in planning, executing, and covering up the crimes. He was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life in prison without parole. George Wagner III's trial is set for February 2024. Despite his family members being convicted, he still maintains his innocence, but likely faces the same fate as his son. The once peaceful relationship between the Wagners and Rodens ended in tragedy, driven by a collective and incomprehensible madness. The consequences of their actions left 3 children without parents. As Sophie grows up, she will one day realize what happened, and it's hard to imagine how she will cope with that knowledge. The Wagners' bitter custody battle had a devastating impact on her, denying her the love and support of her parents, relatives, and a stable upbringing. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family of A. Morales and Brian Lopez. She was the youngest of 2 children, with an older brother named Omar. In infancy, Luz Maria faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction that required a complex operation. Despite the doctor's uncertainty, her mother's prayers and faith in her recovery paid off, and the surgery was successful. Fortunately, the early surgery did not affect her development. During her school years, Luz Maria was an active and well-rounded student. She participated in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance, and was a people person who easily made friends. She also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduation, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university, where she chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. When Luz Maria was a student, she accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz, to buy a motorcycle as a 25th birthday gift for her older brother. They met a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge, who showed them various models and offered recommendations. Although Luz Maria and her mother chose a model, they decided to think it over and consult with the rest of the family before making a decision. Before leaving, Luz Maria gave Jorge her phone number in case they needed further feedback. Shortly after, Jorge called Luz Maria, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, their conversation turned personal. Luz. He continued to call her several times before mustering the courage to invite her to a coffee shop. It was clear that he was smitten with the beautiful brunette, but didn't know how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria was immediately drawn to a handsome young man, and when he asked to meet, she agreed. The only potential obstacle was that he was a year younger, but that didn't deter them. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed, and they both felt an intense connection, believing they had found true love. After just a few months, they decided to take the next step and start living together. Despite their parents' disapproval, they pressed on and got married 6 months later. They kept the wedding intimate, inviting only close friends and family. However, the celebration was almost ruined on the wedding day when the banquet venue encountered an unexpected issue. The couple had to pay a significant amount of extra money to salvage the event, but they were eventually able to go ahead with the ceremony as planned. Jorge is a mysterious figure, and there is limited information available about him in the public domain. What is known is that he was born in 1996 in the town of Santa Catalina Latina, Guatemala. Jorge grew up with his brother Pablo in a low-income family, where financial struggles were a constant reality. As a result, the brothers had to make do with the basics and didn't have the luxury of nice clothes or expensive toys. Contrary to what one might expect, Jorge didn't have big aspirations or ambitions. He never made an effort to study or find a good job, and instead, he took things as they came. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, uncommunicative, and sometimes aggressive. He struggled with controlling his emotions, which made it difficult for him to form meaningful relationships or connect with the opposite sex. Despite these challenges, Jorge was determined to win the heart of Luz Maria, the love of his life. He went all out to impress her, and once she agreed to marry him, he was in a hurry to seal the deal, fearing she might change her mind. Luz Maria's parents, however, were not convinced about Jorge from the start. They had reservations about their son-in-law, although they couldn't quite put their finger on what bothered them. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't persuade their daughter to reconsider her decision to marry Jorge. After the wedding, the young couple's marriage quickly became unhappy. The wife, Luz Maria, got pregnant, but she couldn't find a good job because she didn't have a university degree and was inexperienced. No employer wanted to hire an expectant mother with no skills, so she had to settle for casual labor. Meanwhile, her husband, Jorge, lost his job and showed no enthusiasm for finding a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became dire. Both Jorge and Luz Maria were unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. They couldn't even afford to pay rent, buy food, or purchase basic household necessities. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that they had no choice but to move in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but with a baby to care for and no other options, she eventually agreed. Her mother, was aware of the family's problems and encouraged Luz Maria to return to her childhood home, but Luz Maria insisted that things would improve with Jorge, and there was no need to worry. Luz Maria's mother visited her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house, but was met with a disturbing scene. Luz Maria was in a terrible condition, malnourished from only eating once a day. This was partly due to her in-laws not providing her with sufficient food, as they saw her as unemployed. The situation was even more concerning because Luz Maria was breastfeeding her baby, Alice, so her malnutrition could also harm the child's health. The lack of food was just one of the many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly humiliated and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the baby's crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. He would lash out at Luz Maria, throwing her child's things at her, and on one occasion, even threw a baby bottle at her, hitting Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge refused to stand up for his wife and daughter, treating them as if they were strangers. His mother-in-law, AA, convinced her daughter to take her granddaughter and move back to her parents' house. However, Jorge soon showed up, asking his wife to return and promising to get a job. She agreed, but only if their children could rent an apartment and live separately from his parents. After Luz Maria defended her diploma, she achieved her long-held dream. She landed a job at the city prosecutor's office, earning the respect of her colleagues with her intelligence, talent, and responsibility. As she advanced in her career, the family's financial situation significantly improved, eventually allowing them to afford a car. This improvement was entirely due to the wife's hard work, frugality, and strong reputation among her superiors. Jorge was a selfish and lazy person who relied on his wife, Luz Maria's income instead of working. He had a bad temper, was abusive, and controlled every aspect of Luz Maria's life. He wouldn't let her have friends, go out with colleagues, or even leave the house without him. He constantly checked her phone and social media, and even forbade her from using them. Jorge's behavior was extremely abusive, and he never stood up for Luz Maria when his relatives humiliated or physically abused her. He also used physical violence against her, treating her like his property. Despite this, Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave him, but he would beg for forgiveness, and she would give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after a violent fight, Luz Maria left Jorge and went to her mother's house with their 3-year-old daughter Alice. However, Jorge showed up, promising to change and claiming he had found a new job. Luz Maria believed him again and returned to their apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother, complaining about Jorge's broken promises and theft, which had left them in a desperate situation. However, Luz Maria stopped responding to calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Her mother grew concerned and went to her workplace, only to find out that Luz Maria was missing. The police were informed, and a nationwide search effort began, with Jorge as the prime suspect. He denied any involvement, claiming he was also searching for his wife. However, the investigation revealed that Jorge was the last person to see Luz Maria alive, and he was the only suspect in her disappearance. Jorge was outraged and frustrated to be the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, particularly since his own alibi was inconsistent and unclear. He struggled to explain why he hadn't reported her missing to the police on the day she vanished. If he thought she was at her mother's house, why didn't he call or visit her while the police were searching the area and looking for witnesses? On January 22nd, municipal workers made a gruesome discovery while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain. They found a large plastic bag containing a charred human body. Forensic experts confirmed that the body was that of a young woman. Her parents and brother identified the body as Luz Maria Lopez, despite its severe disfigurement. The body was discovered near the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Although the area lacked surveillance cameras and lighting, pathologists were able to determine that she had suffered severe beating and died from asphyxia. The evidence included internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was alive, and caked blood particles in her nose and mouth. The investigation revealed that Luz Maria's husband, Jorge, was the prime suspect. A disturbing audio recording, sent anonymously by a neighbor, captured a brutal argument between the couple. The recording revealed Luz Maria's desperate screams and cries for help, as well as faint sobs in the background. Unfortunately, the neighbor who made the recording did not call the police or check on the source of the screams. Luz Maria's mother believes that if the neighbor had acted immediately, her daughter might still be alive. The recording was included in the case files, and Luz Maria's mother gave a powerful interview urging citizens to report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than simply recording or filming them. Thousands of people protested across the country, demanding justice for Luz Maria. Although Jorge was arrested, he maintained his innocence, claiming he drove his wife to work on the day she vanished. However, security footage showed their car heading towards her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. At the couple's rented home, investigators found washed-out blood traces and drag marks, indicating that the brutal crime likely occurred there. This suspicion was strengthened by the discovery of microscopic fragments of burnt flesh in the trunk of the family car. A recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress, caught the investigators' attention. Specifically, it was the dense polyethylene wrapping around the mattress that was significant. Comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to conceal his wife's burnt remains. Several neighbors reported hearing Jorge threaten and insult his wife just days before her sudden disappearance. They recalled him shouting that he would kill her if she left him, and that he would hide her body where no one could find it. Based on the evidence collected by expert criminologists and witness testimonies, the investigation has reconstructed the horrific events of the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, Jorge committed the murder, just one day after he and his wife had a violent argument. Jorge had a history of uncontrolled outbursts of anger, but this time he completely lost control. He brutally beat his wife, causing her to scream for help. The neighbors heard her cries but failed to call the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and inflicted a severe head injury. Afterwards, he strangled her with his bare hands and attempted to dispose of the body. To do so, he dragged her into the backyard, poured campfire liquid on her, and set her on fire. However, the intense smoke and smell of burning flesh and hair caught him off guard. The most disturbing aspect of the crime is that Jorge committed these atrocities in front of their 3.5-year-old daughter. Although she may not have fully understood what was happening, she witnessed the beating and murder, which was evident from her cries and screams that were recorded. Jorge, who had a basic understanding of forensic science from his wife's textbooks at home, attempted to cover up the crime and create an alibi. He deliberately chose a dark and secluded area without surveillance cameras to dispose of his wife Maria's body in a drainage sewer, escaping detection. The following morning, Jorge drove to Maria's workplace via their usual route, pretending to have dropped her off as he normally did every morning. Then, he began fabricating a search for his wife, contacting her co-workers, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers employed stall tactics to delay proceedings and discredit the investigation. They argued that all evidence and witness testimony was indirect and that there was no concrete proof to conclusively establish Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, citing his deep depression over being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, crucial evidence came from Maria's phone, which had been in Jorge's possession since the crime. On the first day after the murder, Jorge used Maria's phone to send messages to various people, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. Analysis of the phone's movements showed it was constantly in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense argued that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city to search for her, but this claim was weakened by the fact that he had sent messages from her phone and even called it from his own phone. Further evidence of Jorge's guilt included the bruises and scratches on his body, documented by experts in photos, which suggested that the victim had put up a struggle. A notable scratch on his neck was particularly telling. While it was not possible to find Jorge's skin cells under the victim's fingernails due to the fire, the cumulative evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecutor sought the maximum punishment for the defendant despite several contentious issues in the case. However, the court proceedings were frequently delayed. In October 2022, the defendant was finally convicted of brutally murdering his wife. He received a 50-year prison sentence, still maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. They expressed that caring for their granddaughter has now become the main purpose of their lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Burbeck. Sarah and her boyfriend Brandon arrived at her mother Lindsay's home for a scheduled tea party, but no one answered the door. This was unusual, so Sarah tried to contact her mother several times, but there was no response. She sent 2 text messages, "Where are you?" and a series of question marks, but still received no answer. After waiting outside for an hour, Sarah called her father, Tim Burbeck, to report that her mother was missing and not answering her phone. Tim picked up Sarah and Brandon and took them to his house around midnight. Sarah and Tim then returned to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but found no signs of her or any indication of what might have happened. The house was in order, with no note of explanation. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim reported Lindsay missing to the police, telling the dispatcher that his ex-wife was missing and could not be found. The disappearance of Lindsay shook the small suburban community to its core. In response, hundreds of people from the community banded together to search for her. The search party consisted of men and women, grandparents, dog walkers, teenagers with bicycles, and mothers with strollers. Despite most of them not knowing Lindsay personally, they were determined to find her. For 2 consecutive days, people gathered at Copus, fueled by hope of finding a crucial clue that could solve the mystery of her disappearance. After days of searching, posting appeals on social media and putting up posters, the community's efforts continued unabated. However, as the days turned into weeks, it became increasingly clear that the search would be a challenging one. With each passing day, the chances of finding Lindsay alive grew slimmer. The detectives classified Lindsay as high risk, given that she had never gone missing before, and her family described her disappearance as uncharacteristic of her. Nevertheless, the search party refused to give up, driven by their determination to find Lindsay. The local community quickly sprang into action, printing and distributing thousands of posters featuring Lindsay's face throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group dedicated to the search also rapidly gained popularity, reaching 10,000 members within hours of the police appeal being posted online. As a result, posters were soon plastered on every available surface, including lampposts, storefronts, and traffic lights, calling for the public's help in finding Lindsay. The police launched a comprehensive investigation into her disappearance from her home, involving specialist officers, dog handlers, firefighters, mountain rescue teams, volunteers, and the city's search and rescue team. They scoured the area around Copus and the surrounding countryside, using drones and helicopters to search popular walking and running routes. 4 days after Lindsay vanished, the police released CCTV footage showing her last known movements. The footage, captured at 4:10 p.m. on Burnley Road, showed her walking towards Copus, wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As the search entered its 7th day, hopes of finding Lindsay alive were dwindling. Despite the extensive efforts, the police had yet to uncover any leads on her whereabouts. However, they stressed that there was no evidence to suggest she had fallen victim to a crime, leaving open the possibility that she might still be found alive. The search for Lindsay Burbeck continued into the evening, with hundreds of local residents joining the first mass public search of Copus after a social media appeal. The breakthrough came when a local resident's dog ran into a wooded area in Arrington Cemetery. The dog's strange behavior, sniffing and digging, caught its owner's attention. As the owner approached, they were met with a horrific sight, something soft and unidentifiable underfoot, accompanied by a terrible smell and swarms of flies. Peering closer, the owner saw a foot protruding from the ground, surrounded by earth and grass, wrapped in clear plastic bags. On August 24th, 12 days after Lindsay's disappearance, her body was discovered in the cemetery, buried in a shallow grave. The gruesome discovery marked the end of the search for Lindsay and the beginning of a murder investigation. Dr. Naomi Carter, a pathologist, performed an autopsy on Lindsay's body and concluded that the cause of death was a broken neck, inflicted with extreme force that crushed the larynx. The injury was likely caused by a foot or knee strike. Additionally, there were signs of an attempt to amputate Lindsay's right leg with a saw after her death, resulting in a deep laceration down to the bone. Despite the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter found that Lindsay's injuries were catastrophic. However, she could not rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of Lindsay's disappearance due to the advanced state of decomposition. Before Lindsay's body was discovered, the police and members of the public had searched the area for several days without finding anything. During the search, community volunteers and a police dog handler reported seeing a blue wheelie garbage can abandoned in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet understood. On August 20th, at 9 p.m., volunteers searching the cemetery found a dumpster with a dark stain on the outside, which they suspected might be blood. They took photos and called the police. 2 officers arrived, inspected the dumpster, and found a brown mark that they believed was dirt. Despite this, they decided the dumpster looked new, and there was no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, so they left it in place. Around the same time, other important clues were discovered in the cemetery, but initially overlooked. On August 18th, local resident Christine Alderson found a bloody cloth on the grass while walking her dogs with her daughter. Although she thought the fresh red blood might belong to a homeless man who frequented the area, she still reported it. Another dog walker, Judith Bibby, found red clothing hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardinal Hill Trail, which was likely Lindsay's jacket. She also heard a child's voice, but no signs of struggle, yelling, or screaming. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had traces of blood on them, and upon forensic testing, the results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside surfaces, while Lindsay's DNA was found on the outside surface of the left glove. Additionally, a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers, which had been cut along the sole, were found in a blue plastic bag discarded in the cemetery. Further analysis of the evidence revealed that Lindsay's body had been wrapped in plastic sheeting, and beneath the sheeting, foliage and grass not native to the cemetery grounds were found. This led investigators to conclude that Lindsay's body had been moved from a different location before being buried in the cemetery. During the investigation, detectives remembered a blue trash can that had caught volunteers' attention. Reviewing CCTV footage, they made a surprising discovery: a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area multiple times. The same camera caught him visiting the cemetery 4 times. A suspect emerged, and footage of him carrying a trash can sparked a stir when broadcast on the news. The public helped identify the 16-year-old who surrendered to police the same day. Rocky Marciano Price, a local resident, was the boy in the videotape. He lived with his parents and 5 siblings in their family home of 3 decades on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. Rocky had several mental health conditions, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had struggled with since childhood. His low IQ added to his learning and communication challenges. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick a few days a week, where teachers described him as quiet and nonverbal. A 2015 psychologist's report found that Rocky had a limited understanding of his emotions and emotional well-being. He struggled to connect events and emotions. A 2016 report stated that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision and care. His teachers, including Timothy Bradley, who taught at the school for 18 months, tried to engage Rocky in his education, but he preferred hands-on activities to academic subjects. Rocky rarely participated in conversations, even when discussing topics that interested him. Despite this, he was physically strong and tough for his age. He enjoyed activities like going to the gym, tending to the family's chickens, watching movies, and playing Xbox. Rocky seemed to exist in his own world, often unaware of his actions. Rocky Price randomly targeted Lindsay, killing her simply because she was lonely in the wrong place at the wrong time. On the first anniversary of the crime, August 12, 2020, Price went on trial and was unanimously found guilty by a jury after an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation. Although Price admitted to helping dispose of Lindsay's body, he claimed he had no role in her murder. He stated that a stranger approached him and asked for his help in burying the body in exchange for payment. However, evidence found at his home in Arrington contradicted his claim, including plastic bags identical to those found at Lindsay's grave. Additionally, a tracksuit and other clothing found at his home matched the outfit he wore on surveillance cameras on August 12th, 16th, and 17th, further implicating him in the crime. Defense attorney Mark Fenn Halls argued that Rocky Price, although responsible for burying the victim's body in the cemetery, was not her killer. Despite substantial evidence, Price pleaded not guilty to the crime, but admitted to moving the body. During the trial, Price, through his attorney, provided a statement explaining his movements between the crime scene in Copus and the cemetery where the body was found. However, the prosecutor maintained that Price acted alone. The motive behind the random attack on 47-year-old mother of two, Lindsay, was never revealed, as the perpetrator did not know the victim. The judge sentenced Price to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release when the parole board deems him no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, stating that Price clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking alone just minutes before Lindsay's incident. Meanwhile, another woman, Zoe Braithwaite, had a narrow escape from a similar attack. She encountered a suspicious teenager wearing a hood and walking alone on a parallel path. Her instincts kicked in, and she became wary of the individual, noticing that he looked out of place for a walk in the woods at that time of year. She quickened her pace and eventually ran away, likely saving her own life. The judge noted that if it hadn't been Zoe, it could have been someone else, and it was unfortunately Lindsay who fell victim. This was a calculated and intentional attack. After attempting to target one woman, he deliberately pursued another lone woman. His actions after the crime reveal his ability to think and plan. His teachers testified that he excelled in practical tasks, which he utilized to conceal the body. Rocky Price made 2 trips to Copus on the evening of August 12th. At 6:55 p.m., he was caught on CCTV cameras carrying a black backpack, possibly containing a saw to dismember Lindsay's body. Later, at 8:28 p.m., dog walker Anthony Doe witnessed him pulling out an empty trash can from the same location where his grandfather and other family members are buried. Without showing any signs of panic or excitement, Rocky Price executed a premeditated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He placed her in a blue trash can, dragged her to the cemetery, and spent over an hour burying her near the railroad line. He left behind a saw, gloves, and a trash can at the scene. The senseless and brutal murder of a stranger in broad daylight is deeply disturbing to society. The random nature of the attack and his prior stalking of another woman demonstrate that he poses a significant threat to the public. Rocky Marciano Price's name and photo were published for the first time after a judge lifted restrictions following his guilty verdict. Previously, his identity was kept secret due to his young age. Although the jury knew details about Price, they were not fully disclosed until after the verdict. Price's mental illness does not excuse his actions, as he knew killing was wrong. Lindsay's funeral was held at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th, where over 200 mourners gathered to pay their respects. As police directed traffic on Manchester Road, Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, was carried into the church. The outpouring of sympathy was evident in the dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers alike left at the scene in her memory. According to her daughter Sarah, Lindsay was a woman full of optimism and positivity, always looking forward to the future. In fact, she had plans to visit Glasgow with her friend Sharon and was hoping to find love on the Match.com dating site. Tragically, her bright future was cut short on a sunny summer day. Rocky Price's fascination with death and mutilation may be a symptom of a deeper issue, such as autism. This neurodevelopmental disorder can cause difficulties with social interaction, motor skills, and repetitive behaviors, leading to withdrawal and isolation. While the exact cause is unclear, the consequences of Rocky's actions fit the severity of his crime, including burying Lindsay's mutilated body. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Elizabeth Smart. On June 5, 2002, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was asleep in her bedroom in the affluent town of Federal Heights, Salt Lake City, Utah, sharing the room with her sister Mary Catherine. As the night wore on, their peaceful slumber was shattered. A soft-spoken man, armed with a knife, forced open a window in the girls' room, disturbing Mary Catherine, who pretended to be asleep in an attempt to protect her sister. The intruder then turned to Elizabeth, ordering her to remain silent, threatening to harm her if she didn't comply. Fearing for her life, Elizabeth obeyed, putting on shoes before being taken outside the house. Meanwhile, Mary Catherine lay still for 2 hours, waiting for the perfect moment to alert her parents, Ed and Lois Smart. When she finally woke them up, she told them that someone had taken Elizabeth, but her parents were initially skeptical, thinking their daughter might have been dreaming. However, as the events began to unfold, they took Mary Catherine's story seriously. After inspecting Elizabeth and Mary Catherine's bedroom, Ed and Lois found a cut window screen, which corroborated Mary Catherine's story. Concerned for Elizabeth's safety, Ed and Lois promptly notified the authorities. The police arrived at the Smart family home and questioned Mary Catherine about the man who had abducted Elizabeth from their bedroom. Mary Catherine described the abductor as having dark hair and dark hair on his arms and the backs of his hands. Although the man had spoken quietly to Elizabeth during the incident, Mary Catherine could still identify his voice as somehow familiar, even though she couldn't recall any specific occasion when she had heard it before. About 3.5 hours after Elizabeth was taken, the authorities used the Rachel Alert system to broadcast information about her abduction to the public. The Rachel Alert, named after a Utah girl who was abducted and murdered, enabled the authorities to rapidly disseminate information to a wide audience and enlist the public's help in locating Elizabeth. The police investigated people who had toured the Smart family's home, which was up for sale, as potential suspects in Elizabeth's abduction, since she had been taken from her bedroom on June 5, 2002. Additionally, they searched the family's computer, seeking any online interactions Elizabeth may have had with strangers, as this was a common tactic used in child abduction cases. The day after Elizabeth's kidnapping, her devastated parents, Ed and Lois, made a heartfelt and emotional appeal on national television, pleading for her safe return. Ed addressed the perpetrator directly, his voice filled with desperation and love, asking them to bring their daughter home. With tears in his eyes, he begged the person responsible to have mercy and return Elizabeth safely, expressing his immense love for his daughter and his unwavering commitment to finding her. In Federal Heights, the police interviewed Elizabeth's neighbors, but none of them reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the day she was abducted. The lack of information was surprising to the police, who had hoped to gather more leads to aid the investigation. Following Elizabeth's abduction, Rocky Anderson, the mayor of Salt Lake City, made a public announcement offering an initial reward of $10,000 for her safe return to her family. This amount was later increased to $250,000. A massive search effort was launched, with nearly 12,200 volunteers joining Elizabeth's family and friends to look for her. However, at a news conference, the police admitted that despite receiving thousands of tips, their progress in the case was limited. The authorities in Salt Lake City solicited assistance from other police departments statewide, but lacked crucial evidence, such as a vehicle description, to pursue significant leads. As a result, the investigation into Elizabeth's disappearance stagnated, causing frustration among law enforcement officials. Captain Scott Atkinson of the Salt Lake City Police Department publicly stated that all individuals were still suspects in Elizabeth's abduction, while reaffirming that her family was not the primary focus of the investigation. A volunteer searching for Elizabeth reported a suspicious man to the police after spotting him in a wooded canyon. The volunteer described the man's suspicious behavior, prompting the police to launch an overnight search. Despite their efforts, they couldn't find the man and eventually dismissed the tip as not credible. The police also received a tip from a local milkman in Federal Heights. He claimed to have seen a man driving an older gray Honda or Nissan on Elizabeth Street a day or two before her disappearance. The milkman said he felt uneasy about the driver and wrote down the license plate number. However, when the police checked their database for the license plate number, they couldn't find any relevant information or leads, so they dismissed the tip as not viable. The police officers investigating Elizabeth Smart's abduction faced a significant challenge due to the large number of people who gathered at the Smart residence in the hours immediately following her abduction. When the police arrived at the scene around 4 a.m., they found the home already crowded with people, which compromised the integrity of any potential evidence. As the search for Elizabeth Smart continued, the police questioned a man who had interacted with her at a social event prior to her abduction. However, they soon cleared him of any suspicion and determined he had no involvement in her disappearance. The search efforts intensified, with over 20 volunteer pilots flying their private planes over the Salt Lake area, but unfortunately, these efforts yielded no results. Tracking dogs picked up a scent in Red Boot Canyon, several miles from Elizabeth's home, but police searched the area and found nothing. The search for Elizabeth had taken a toll on her father, Ed Smart, who was on the verge of exhaustion. He collapsed from the strain and was taken to the hospital, but was released a few hours later and continued searching for his daughter. Ed and his wife, Lois, were utterly exhausted, unable to sleep, and barely holding on. In a media interview, Ed expressed his frustration and determination to find Elizabeth, stating that they were holding on to hope that their daughter was alive and would soon return home to them. Despite their exhaustion, Ed and Lois Smart remained hopeful that Elizabeth would come back to them. Elizabeth's mother, Lois Smart, publicly declared her love and devotion to her daughter through a heartfelt statement to the media, saying, "Elizabeth, if you can hear us, we love you." Her loved ones gathered for a candlelight vigil, praying for her safe return home. Following Elizabeth's abduction, the police asked her father, Ed, to take a polygraph test, which he willingly agreed to, demonstrating his family's cooperation in aiding the authorities to locate their daughter. The investigation subsequently ruled out the possibility that Elizabeth had staged her own disappearance and confirmed that she did not run away. Police got a tip about Brett Michael Edmonds, who was sighted in Federal Heights around Elizabeth's abduction time. They looked for him, but couldn't find him. He'd moved to New Mexico and Texas. After a chase, they caught a guy who looked like him, but it wasn't him. The police eventually located Brett Michael Edmonds in West Virginia, where he had been hospitalized due to an overdose and liver failure. Although his health was critical, and there were fears he might not survive, his condition stabilized enough to allow authorities to question him about Elizabeth's abduction. In a fortunate turn of events, Brett was conscious, alert, and able to speak, enabling the police and FBI agents to interview him. During the interview, Brett fully cooperated with the authorities, who ultimately concluded that he was not involved in Elizabeth's abduction. After Brett Michael Edmonds was cleared as a suspect in Elizabeth's abduction, police turned their attention to 48-year-old Richard Albert Ritchie. Elizabeth's father, Ed Smart, informed police that he had employed Richard at his home for 2 months the previous year. Ed said that since Richard didn't own a vehicle, they made a deal. Ed would give Richard his 1990 Jeep Cherokee in exchange for his labor. However, Ed was unaware that Richard Ritchie was a career criminal, and he later stated that if he had known about Richard's background, he wouldn't have hired him. Richard Ritchie's criminal history dates back to 1973, when he was convicted of second-degree felony burglary, marking the start of a string of offenses over several decades. In 1981, he was convicted of burglary for a separate incident. His most serious crime occurred in 1983, when he was sent to prison for aggravated robbery and attempted murder after wounding a police officer during a gunfire exchange with authorities during a drugstore robbery. Additionally, Richard Ritchie was convicted of theft in 1996 for stealing approximately $2,500 worth of food from a food pantry in Richfield. Corrections records show that Richard Ritchie was paroled in September 2000. In a media interview, Ed Smart expressed doubts about Richard Ritchie's involvement in his daughter Elizabeth's abduction. Despite Ritchie's criminal history, Ed initially thought him a capable worker. On June 14, 2002, Richard Ritchie was arrested for a parole violation. The police could not confirm his whereabouts on the day Elizabeth was abducted. Richard Ritchie denied any involvement through his attorney and stated that the police had thoroughly searched his home, including digging up his garden. Despite this, no evidence related to Elizabeth's abduction was found. Ritchie claimed he fully cooperated with the police, providing blood samples for DNA comparison and sitting through 26 hours of interviews. He also handed over his vehicle for investigation. By July 2002, Elizabeth Smart had been missing for a month, and her family was desperate for her return. When police received a report of a girl matching Elizabeth's description in Nebraska under suspicious circumstances, they thought their prayers had been answered. A gas station witness reported seeing a crying girl, aged 12 to 14, who seemed to be held against her will in a minivan. The witness provided a detailed description that matched Elizabeth's appearance. This news sent shockwaves through the Smart family, who eagerly hoped for any lead that might help find their missing daughter. However, a thorough police investigation revealed that the report was unrelated to Elizabeth's abduction. Despite a thorough search, police found no evidence linking the sighting to Elizabeth's case. This disappointment left the Smart family struggling with mixed emotions as they continued to hope for Elizabeth's safe return while acknowledging the possibility of false leads. Undeterred, the Smart family remained determined to find Elizabeth, maintaining a cautious optimism. They refused to rule out the possibility that the girl at the gas station was Elizabeth, but stated that they needed to keep an open mind. The family spokesperson clarified that while they weren't necessarily holding out hope that it was Elizabeth, they would be overjoyed if it were. Richard Ritchie, the main suspect in Elizabeth's disappearance, was charged with theft and burglary in 2 separate incidents. One incident occurred on April 4, 2001, when he allegedly stole items from a house in the Federal Heights neighborhood, which is a second-degree felony and a Class A misdemeanor. The other incident happened on June 6, 2001, when he allegedly stole jewelry and a perfume bottle valued at approximately $3,500 from the Smart family home, which is a third-degree felony. Ritchie pleaded not guilty to these charges. The stolen items were not related to Elizabeth's kidnapping investigation. Salt Lake District Attorney David Yoakum announced the charges at a press conference, stating that Ritchie had denied the theft allegations and was subsequently fired from his job. In August 2002, the police investigation into Elizabeth Smart's abduction hit a major roadblock when Richard Ritchie, their best lead, died from a severe brainstem injury that caused bleeding. Ritchie's condition worsened rapidly, leaving him unable to communicate or breathe on his own. His family made the painful decision to take him off life support in a last-ditch effort to save his life. Although doctors operated to remove a blood clot from his brain and relieve pressure on his brainstem, the damage was too extensive and their efforts were in vain. Despite this setback, the authorities persisted in their search for Elizabeth Smart's abductor. However, Richie's death posed a significant obstacle to the investigation, undermining confidence in other leads and hindering progress in the case. In August 2002, a horrific crime was committed when an 11-year-old girl was taken from her bedroom and subjected to sexual assault and brutal beating. The severity of her injuries was appalling, with every bone in the middle of her face broken, as revealed by hospital doctors. She required surgery, but sadly, her condition remained critical after the attack. The police investigation led to the arrest of Javier Sickler, a close friend of the girl's father, who was charged with aggravated burglary, aggravated assault, and attempted murder. Javier Sickler claimed that he remembered knocking on the front door of the victim's home, but alleged that he lost consciousness afterward. Despite initial similarities with the Elizabeth Smart abduction case, the police established that Javier Sickler was not involved in her kidnapping. As the search for Elizabeth Smart dragged on, the police began to explore unconventional approaches. They consulted psychics, individuals claiming to possess extrasensory perception that could uncover clues about her location. One tip from these psychics suggested that Elizabeth might be buried in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. This prompted a Seattle-based company to step forward, claiming that over a dozen of its members had pinpointed Elizabeth's body using a technique called technical remote viewing. According to these individuals, their psychic powers had revealed that Elizabeth was killed within hours of her abduction. However, when the police investigated the alleged tomb, they found no evidence of Elizabeth's whereabouts. In November 2002, Walter Kenneth Holloway was arrested after claiming to be the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart and demanding a $3 million ransom from her parents, Ed and Lois Smart. Holloway contacted the Smart family and the Salt Lake Police Department, threatening to harm Elizabeth if he didn't receive the money. However, the police tracked him down to South Carolina and found no evidence linking him to her abduction. Ed Smart was outraged by the extortion scheme, which he felt diverted police attention away from finding his daughter and wasted resources that could have been used to locate her. In October 2002, Elizabeth's sister Mary Catherine had a sudden realization. The voice of the abductor was identical to that of Emmanuel, an unemployed man the family had briefly hired to work on their roof and rake leaves in their yard. Although the police were initially skeptical, due to the short duration of Emmanuel's employment with the family, the long delay between the abduction and Mary Catherine's revelation, and her limited exposure to the abductor's voice, the family decided to have a sketch artist draw Emmanuel's likeness based on their descriptions. The resulting sketch was finally released in February 2003 and received widespread media attention, featuring on prominent television shows such as Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. Relatives of a man named Brian David Mitchell identified a suspect drawing released by the police. They provided contemporary photographs of him, which helped authorities verify that the sketch was an accurate likeness. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah, recognized Brian David Mitchell walking with a woman and a girl who they knew from the news as the missing girl's abductor. The woman accompanying Mitchell was later identified as his wife, Wanda Berry. The couples quickly called the police, and officers were sent to the location. After questioning, the missing girl from Salt Lake City, Elizabeth Smart, was confirmed to be present. The officers then rescued her and arrested both Mitchell and Berry. Elizabeth provided a shocking account of being abducted, abused, and held captive. Brian David Mitchell had taken her from her home to an encampment outside Salt Lake City. The camp was a makeshift shelter hidden by dense foliage for camouflage. There, she met Wanda Barzy, Mitchell's wife, who played a significant role in her captivity. At first, Wanda Barzee acted like a caring mother figure, offering Elizabeth comfort and warmth. However, as the weeks passed, Barzee's behavior changed dramatically. She began controlling Elizabeth, forcing her to follow their strange religious beliefs. Barzee demanded that Elizabeth pray, read scriptures, and take part in religious rituals. Elizabeth faced a highly traumatic experience during her captivity when she was forced to marry Brian David Mitchell against her will. Wanda Barzee threatened her with physical harm if she refused to comply with their demands. The wedding ceremony, which Mitchell pretended was a symbol of eternal love, was actually a sham with no legal validity, serving only to reinforce Brian David Mitchell's control over Elizabeth. After forcing Elizabeth into marriage, Brian David Mitchell began assaulting her. He claimed he was a Davidic king, tasked by a higher power to kidnap virgins to fight the Antichrist, as a justification for his actions. During her captivity, Elizabeth suffered unimaginable abuse, including being chained to a tree with a metal cable that severely restricted her movement and prevented her from escaping. In addition to physical restraint, Elizabeth was also subjected to psychological manipulation. She was forced to take the new name Esther, inspired by the biblical figure, which symbolized the loss of her identity and the control exerted over her by Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. Elizabeth was repeatedly sexually assaulted by Brian David Mitchell, leaving her traumatized and fearful. She was also forced to look at explicit magazines, further worsening her trauma and degradation. Throughout her ordeal, Elizabeth was constantly threatened with violence and even death, leaving her in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. To weaken Elizabeth's resistance, Mitchell frequently forced her to consume alcohol and take drugs, exploiting these substances to break down her defenses and make her more susceptible to his control. The constant intoxication left her disoriented, vulnerable, and disconnected from reality, making it easier for her captors to commit their atrocities. Moreover, Elizabeth was subjected to starvation and fed scraps by her captors. After her rescue, Elizabeth described Wanda Barzee as the most evil woman she had ever encountered. Following years of legal proceedings, Wanda Barzee pleaded guilty to all charges related to Elizabeth's abduction and was sentenced to concurrent 15-year terms in state and federal prison in 2016. Her federal imprisonment was eventually terminated, and she was transferred from the Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, to the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah, to begin serving her state prison sentence. Elizabeth Smart spoke out against the release of Wanda Barzee in September 2018, despite which Barzee was still set free. At the time, Smart, an advocate for child safety, expressed concern that Barzee still posed a threat to others, citing her lack of remorse and signs of rehabilitation. The controversy surrounding Barzee's release drew media attention and highlighted ongoing concerns about the parole of convicted criminals. After years of legal battles, Brian David Mitchell was sentenced to life imprisonment for kidnapping Elizabeth Smart. During the hearing, Elizabeth addressed her kidnapper directly, delivering a powerful and emotional statement. She described the pain and trauma he had inflicted, telling him that the 9 months in captivity had taken an irreplaceable part of her life. Despite this, Elizabeth showed remarkable resilience and determination, vowing to lead a good life despite the darkness he had brought into her life. Her words reflected her strength and determination to overcome her challenges. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On January 12, 2019, a report emerged regarding the death of 65-year-old Michael Redlick. He was a former NBA executive with the Memphis Grizzlies and a respected professor at the University of Central Florida. Initially believed to have died from a heart attack, it was later revealed that he had been stabbed in the chest. There were speculations about the incident, including the possibility of self-inflicted harm. Forensic experts eventually confirmed that it was a homicide, and Michael's wife was identified as the perpetrator. In June 2022, Michael's wife, Danielle Redlick, went to trial, but the case remained complex. She did not admit to premeditated murder, and her testimony changed throughout the legal proceedings. The legal battle between the prosecution and defense was intense. Danielle Redlick, a 46-year-old woman, she had a petite stature and a slender physique, with chestnut hair that had turned gray either. Before the incident, Danielle was a regular American woman, a mother of two, and a specialist in multimedia communications. She wasn't particularly well known until the crime against her husband brought her into the public eye. Danielle was born in Florida in 1976 and later moved to Cleveland, Ohio with her family. Her upbringing was typical, growing up kind and well-mannered with a personality. Her appreciation for beauty deepened as she grew older. She attended Valencia College and earned an Associate of Arts degree before joining Baldwin Wallace University's psychology department in 1996. In 1996, Danielle's mother remarried, but the marriage was short-lived due to Caitlin's passing from cancer. Caitlin had been battling breast cancer for a while and received quality medical care through her husband's insurance, but unfortunately, the treatment was unsuccessful. After her mother's death, Danielle and her siblings went to live with their stepfather, Michael Redlick. Michael later became Danielle's husband and met his tragic end in 2019. Their relationship started as a friendship and evolved over time as Danielle cared for the younger children and worked part-time jobs. Michael, focused on his career in professional sports, particularly player recruitment, grew attached to the children and developed a strong bond with Danielle. Despite their age gap, their relationship blossomed naturally. Danielle initially kept their relationship hidden from her family, but eventually revealed it. They found happiness and support in each other's company. Michael used his connections to help Danielle secure a job at an advertising agency. With his good income, he devoted all his free time to family activities. The circumstances were favorable for both of them. Mr. Redlick received a job offer as Vice President of Corporate Sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball club. This new role required him to move to a different state. He asked Danielle to go with him, but she hesitated due to her studies and attachment to her current lifestyle. She declined, but they maintained their relationship long distance with frequent visits. Michael surprised Danielle by showing her the house he had bought for them, a beautiful cottage near the Mississippi River in a peaceful neighborhood. Eventually, Danielle decided to move in with him. To support her decision, Michael helped Danielle find a job in the radio industry. Looking back, Danielle remembered that everything went smoothly at first. Things only changed later due to Michael's demanding job. Years later, during a trial involving Danielle, her daughter Jaden testified about Michael's vital role as a father in raising them both. They attended prestigious schools with their father's encouragement in sports programs. Jaden had a strong bond with her father, but felt disconnected from her mother, viewing her as problematic. She believed her mother caused conflicts at home, while Michael aimed for family harmony. What caused the discord in their seemingly happy family? Michael's new job brought more responsibilities and stress, leading to a strained relationship with management. He started drinking heavily. Despite Danielle's efforts to support him, Michael's drinking led to conflicts. One significant incident occurred when Michael struck Danielle during an argument. He regretted his actions, seeking immediate medical help for Danielle's injuries. The next day, Michael made a heartfelt gesture to show his remorse and care for Danielle, who forgave him and decided not to report the incident. Despite a strict domestic violence law in the state, Danielle chose not to cause trouble for her husband, as this wasn't the first warning sign. Similar behavior had occurred before. In 2003, the Redlicks had a daughter named Jaden. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Their family life seemed positive, but Michael's work issues persisted, affecting their family dynamics. 7 years later, they welcomed their son Sawyer. The situation between Michael and Danielle grew increasingly tense as Michael started drinking again, leading to more frequent conflicts. One altercation turned physical when he grabbed Danielle by the throat and pinned her against the wall, terrifying her. Unable to bear his violent behavior, Danielle left with the kids to live with her relatives, who initially disapproved of their marriage but eventually accepted it. Michael visited frequently, asking for forgiveness and urging Danielle to return. After some time, they reconciled, but their relationship remained turbulent as they moved multiple times due to Michael's job opportunities. In 2014, both unemployed and living off savings, they faced another relocation to Indiana. While the prospect of a new home seemed promising, Danielle stayed in California with the children to handle their property sale. The constant moving took a toll on the family, especially the children, who struggled to adapt. Over about a year, their financial situation improved, but the distance strained Michael and Danielle's marriage. They communicated less and grew apart. When they reunited, new challenges arose. Danielle suspected infidelity due to Michael's distant behavior, but he revealed health issues he had been hiding. After trying various treatments, he opted for testosterone injections, revitalizing him physically and mentally, but also making him more aggressive. One night, after an incident of violence, Danielle decided to leave, but Michael begged for forgiveness. Despite the turmoil, they stayed together, raising their children. However, their relationship had changed irreversibly, leading to more conflicts and increased drinking from Michael. His discontent often turned to physical aggression, but Danielle, deeply in love, stayed. The ongoing tension affected her deeply, making her anxious and withdrawn. She found solace in photography. Despite their troubles, the family appeared normal to outsiders. By the end of the year, they settled in Florida, where Michael changed careers. His new job brought stability and joy, though less pay than before. They eventually bought a home in Winter Park, where Danielle preferred the attic to escape Michael's outbursts. Danielle struggled with alcohol addiction, while Michael supported the family. She handled household tasks and the children, isolating herself due to disputes leading to their separation in 2016. Despite this, Michael continued to financially support and visit the children. Danielle found a job at a school where new friends helped her overcome depression and regain independence. Although Michael had freedom to come and go, Danielle still interacted with him. An argument led to Danielle being hospitalized with a concussion. She stayed silent out of fear, but Michael misinterpreted her silence. During questioning, Danielle revealed that in October 2016, Michael had tried to run her over with his car, prompting her to go to the police briefly before leaving due to fear. They reconciled and moved back in together, which had tragic consequences. On January 12, 2019, a 911 call from Danielle reported Michael's apparent heart attack. Upon arrival, authorities found a suspicious scene with a strong cleaning agent smell, a pink liquid bucket, and Michael dead from a knife wound, not a heart attack as claimed. Danielle had wrist cuts, receiving medical attention before police began their investigation. Forensic analysis indicated someone else caused Michael's death, disproving self-harm. The pink liquid was diluted blood, an attempt to conceal evidence that ultimately failed, leaving visible blood splatters in the house. Furthermore, it is important to note that a large knife was found at the entrance of the kitchen, while 3 smaller knives were discovered inside the sink. After doctors confirmed that her injuries were not life-threatening, she was questioned. During the interview, she frequently changed her statements. Initially, she claimed to have thought her husband died of heart disease. Later, she stated he had taken his own life following an argument. However, the evidence refuted her claims, as it is difficult for such a wound to be self-inflicted, and individuals intending to end their lives usually choose simpler and less painful methods. The autopsy revealed that Michael died from blood loss. With timely medical help, his life could have been saved. Additionally, he had a lacerated left eye. Toxicological tests showed high levels of alcohol in his system. The investigation found that a few days before the incident, there was an argument between the spouses witnessed by their elder daughter. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. However, their daughter Jaden intervened and took the bottle away from him. After this incident, Danielle left the house and returned once her husband had fallen asleep. According to Jaden, it was the first time she had seen such a burst of anger in her father, for which he later apologized multiple times. She still believed he was a loving and caring father, but asserted that her mother often instigated conflicts. The next day, the couple reconciled, and Michael invited his wife and children to a soccer game. However, witnesses noted that Danielle appeared upset and was virtually non-communicative that evening. The parents dropped their kids off at a friend's house for a sleepover and were left alone afterward. Later in the evening, Danielle stopped by McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, she found her husband drunk again. During dinner, Danielle received a message from an unknown man. Michael saw it, bit off a piece of his hamburger, and spat it at his wife. He then attacked her and attempted to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle grabbed the first thing she could find, a knife, and stabbed him in the chest. He fell and began to bleed profusely. The defendant claimed she immediately called emergency services, but accidentally dialed the wrong number. Her actions were confirmed during the investigation. In a state of shock, she lay down next to Michael and fell asleep until morning. When asked by the prosecution why she lied during the emergency call and questioning, Mrs. Redlick said she was afraid and worried that no one would believe she acted in self-defense. There were reasons for this fear. Shortly before the incident, she had a scuffle with friends. When the police arrived, she resisted, even trying to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, resulting in charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle had been on probation for about a year. It was also found that the cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted. She claimed she had tried to end her life due to emotional turmoil, but the injuries were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her claims were not believed. Investigators also discovered that Danielle was not a role model. After finding out about Michael's infidelities, she joined a dating site where she interacted with men and was unfaithful in retaliation. Her profile stated she was single. Analysis of messages between Michael and Danielle showed she still loved her husband. Learning of his affairs left her feeling betrayed and disillusioned. She also found out Michael planned to leave her despite his repentance and desire to mend their relationship. Danielle explained she found it difficult to understand and accept her husband's actions. She was heartbroken to realize she had devoted the best years of her life to a man who didn't appreciate her. The prosecution used the information against her in court. They argued that the crime was premeditated, committed in a fit of rage because she couldn't forgive his infidelity and the impending divorce as Mr. Redlick had planned. Neighbors confirmed her frequent fits of anger, noting that the couple often had loud arguments that sometimes turned physical. People who knew them saw Michael in a positive light, viewing him as kind and helpful. On the other hand, Danielle was perceived as quarrelsome. Video evidence displayed her irrationally attacking her husband. Friends and Michael's brother supported this portrayal. One person even remembered calling her crazy, but assured others that things would be fine if steak knives were hidden. Her lawyer argued that her actions were in self-defense, stemming from years of emotional and physical abuse. Family members who witnessed their arguments confirmed Michael's rough and emotionally abusive behavior. They were aware of his frequent physical abuse and humiliation towards her, although not in their presence. Some family members mentioned that Danielle became nervous and quick-tempered only after years of marriage. The prosecution emphasized that she left her husband to die, indicating premeditation. They pointed out that she logged into a dating app the night of the incident, suggesting hatred and resentment, possibly for financial gain. After a divorce, Danielle stood to lose part of their accumulated wealth. At the time of Michael's death, her net worth was estimated at around $1.2 million. Furthermore, it was noted that she frequently changed her statements during the investigation and potentially tampered with evidence. However, the defense argued that Mr. Redlick was a manipulator and predator. Following his first wife's death, he relentlessly pursued his stepdaughter and shaped a young woman to meet his needs. During the investigation, the prosecution offered Danielle a plea deal to admit to manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years of imprisonment. She declined. Even though if found guilty of first or second-degree murder, she faced a life sentence. She kept insisting she was innocent. The trial outcome shocked everyone. On July 17, 2022, the jury gave their verdict. They found Danielle Redlick not guilty of premeditated murder. They believed her actions were in self-defense. However, they did find her guilty of tampering with evidence, for which she received a 5-year suspended sentence. Having already served 3 years, these were credited toward her sentence. On August 5, 2022, when the sentence was announced, the defendant was released in the courtroom. What do you think? Was the verdict fair, or were the jurors misled into believing Danielle's actions were justified? Brad Sickett came into this world on March 3, 1976, in the quaint town of Kingman, Kansas, USA. As the only child of Janet Sickett and her husband, whose name and details from his previous marriage remain strictly confidential, Brad had an interesting family dynamic. Janet had another son, Robert, from her previous marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Sickett family had deep roots in law enforcement, resulting in a household characterized by strict discipline. Though information about Brad's childhood is scarce, it is documented that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was tall and sturdy, traits that enabled him to pursue wrestling and bodybuilding during his high school years. His dedication to physical fitness soon paid off, as he excelled in various inter-school tournaments, often securing first place. This success turned him into a star wrestler and a notable figure within his school. At 16, while competing at a major wrestling event in the Kansas City Coliseum, Brad met a girl named Vashti Forrest. Born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, Vashti was Julie Hosteler and Clinton Forrest's third child. She had an older brother named Rich and an older sister named Catherine. A younger sister named Tyler completed their family. Vashti possessed a noble spirit and enjoyed the affectionate support of her siblings, especially Catherine and Rich, who treated her with special care. In contrast, Julie wasn't particularly affectionate and often verbally abused her children. Despite these challenges at home, Vashti's outgoing personality earned her a large circle of friends. Though she received much love from those around her, Vashti struggled with self-esteem issues. She didn't feel beautiful or intelligent enough, and often sought approval from others. This quest for approval sometimes undermined her confidence. Nonetheless, Vashti became a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team, a role she loved passionately. She never missed any matches, which led to her fateful encounter with Brad at one such event. Brad immediately caught Vashti's eye. She was deeply attracted to him from their first meeting. He instantly asked her out, fascinated by his boldness. The girl yes, and they both felt it during that initial meeting. From then on, they became inseparable. After graduation, the girl went to the University of UO, and the guy honored his family traditions by joining the police academy. However, during this period, they spent less time together, which profoundly affected Brett, who was already starting to show signs of a controlling and irascible nature. His increasing jealousy eventually became too much for Vashti to handle. Tired and overwhelmed, she decided to end the relationship. The breakup was neither violent nor traumatic. Both went on with their lives. After graduating from the police academy, Brett joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, just 50 kilometers from Kingman. Despite time passing and achieving career milestones, he couldn't forget Vashti. Deep down, he still loved her and never gave up the hope of reuniting with her. When an opportunity presented itself, he visited her and shared how regularly attending church had transformed him into a new man through his faith. Brett's words appeared sincere to Vashti, perhaps due to faith or genuine love, leading her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brett didn't want any delays. He informed her family of his intentions and asked for her hand in marriage. Her parents, Julie and Clinton Forrest, were delighted by this news. They believed Brett and Vashti made a wonderful couple and anticipated a happy marriage. The wedding took place in 2004. Brett and Vashti settled in a peaceful neighborhood in Kingman, where they made new friends, including Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to barbecues in his garden. It seemed like the perfect setting for establishing their new home. However, sometimes Vashti noticed that Brett's unpleasant side resurfaced sporadically. Problems cropped up repeatedly due to his dominant disposition. When Vashti became pregnant, though, these differences seemed to fade away temporarily. In fall 2006, their first son Brandon was born. 2 years later came another son named Bronson. The experience of recent parenthood brought about a realization for both of them. The inherent risks associated with Brett's job as a police officer required careful planning for their children's future welfare if one of them were ever absent. After thorough consideration and analysis of their situation, they chose guardianship arrangements for Brandon and Bronson should it ever become necessary. Brett's brother, Robert, worked as a trainer at the police facility in Vashi. Meanwhile, she dedicated herself fully to raising their children and managing household chores. In her spare moments, she penned down her feelings in a diary. Although Brett was a loving and devoted father, his behavior could be somewhat rough with the children during playtime, often treating them like adults. Even though Brett's violent tendencies appeared controlled, it seemed they were waiting to break free. One day at work, Brett used excessive force to subdue an inmate by slamming his head against a concrete wall. The victim sustained a fractured skull and brain damage and died a few days later. Brett faced a lawsuit for excessive use of force, but received full support from his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing him of all charges. Brett did not show remorse. Instead, he admitted to colleagues that he enjoyed violence, especially when punishing those he deemed bad people. Later on, Brett and another officer forcibly subdued a defendant who had lost control and resisted removal from the courtroom for contempt of court. This action drew praise and resulted in both officers receiving a bronze medal from the sheriff for their meritorious behavior. Despite Vashi's love for her children, she still had career aspirations. Recognizing the emptiness she felt inside, she sought and secured employment as the new human resources manager at Vito's communications company. Brett took this development ambivalently. Ideally, he wanted his wife to focus solely on household duties and the education of their children, Brendan and Bronson. It wasn't long before he began to complain about Vashi spending too much time at work, a role he didn't accept her having in the first place. Consequently, their arguments increased significantly. For the sake of their children's well-being, Vashi made extensive efforts to mend their marriage, but felt it was all in vain. She had an intuition that this situation would end badly. With the aim of resolving their conflicts, Vashi and Brett began seeing Connie Sodman, a clinical social worker, during initial sessions. Vashi expressed feelings of profound loneliness and isolation, considering couples therapy as a potential last effort to salvage their marriage. However, when she broached the topic of divorce, Brett became extremely upset, resulting in weeks of psychological harassment. He threatened to kill her if she attempted to leave, claiming he could manipulate her death to appear as a suicide because of his position as a police officer. He even mentioned the possibility of burning down their home to destroy any evidence. In the days that followed, Brett had a one-on-one meeting with Kai, in which he declared furiously that if Vashi continued pursuing divorce, he would ensure she never saw their children, Brendan or Bronson, again. He further vowed that he wouldn't hesitate to take them out of the country. In early 2011, Brett transitioned from patrolling the streets to becoming a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashi began feeling much better than she had in recent years. She continued therapy and implemented healthy changes such as exercising regularly and improving her diet. The decision to divorce gradually became more definite for Vashi. While she felt sadness about the end of her marriage, she predominantly experienced relief and optimism regarding her future. To enhance the effects of physical activity, she started taking an appetite suppressant, despite knowing it might have side effects like depression. Within a few months, Vashi's social life became very active. She expanded her contacts at work and met someone she found attractive. She confided in her older sister Kathleen about her fears concerning Brett's discovery of her plans due to potential repercussions. Vashi also spoke candidly with her coworkers about various threats from Brett. During this time, Brett discovered Vashi was keeping a personal diary without her knowledge and took it to his office to scan and print some pages. He spent considerable time researching information on suicides, fire-related injuries, homicides versus suicides, and their causes. In the first week of April 2011, Vashi attended a final individual session with Kai due to concerns about how Brett would respond upon receiving the divorce petition. Together, they developed a protection plan for herself and their children. When the man received the papers, Brett arrived at his office on the morning of 29th. To his surprise, he found an envelope containing divorce papers. After lunch, he discovered a projector in the pantry. He used it to project handwriting from Vas's diary, traced it, and then wrote a goodbye note to his children. At same time, Brett printed out documents on how to kill a person and pass it off as suicide. He then asked the maintenance staff how best to dispose of computer hard drives. After researching their recommendations, Brett used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained scanned images. Following this, he threw the waste into a dumpster. Later on, Brett drove to a convenience store and bought gasoline, which he loaded into his van. Several hours later, he pleaded with Vashti to let him spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children. The man promised to leave the next morning. Although they discussed joint finances, Brett again begged Vashti to change her mind about the divorce. However, when he saw she was determined to proceed, he soon renewed his threats. Exhausted from fruitless arguments, Vashti retired to her room to sleep while Brett stayed downstairs on the couch. Around 3:15 a.m., he went upstairs with a gun in his hand and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake watching television heard the shot, but did not pay much attention. Meanwhile, Brett placed the next to Vashti's lifeless body and staged the scene to fake a suicide. He then doused the hallway and bedroom with gasoline and took her cell phone, calling himself from it. Subsequently, he took Brendan and Bronson to a safe house. When everything was ready, he started the fire. The flames quickly engulfed the main room and caused cartridges still in the chamber of the gun to start firing. Neighbors woke up startled at around 3:45 a.m., initially thinking there was a shooting. By 3:57 a.m., 911 operators received a desperate call from Brett, who said that his wife had shot herself. When emergency responders arrived on scene, they found the first floor of the house burning with Brett outside in Vashti's car, along with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was in the house, and Brett replied that his wife was still inside. He further claimed that Vashti had shot herself due to depression, but had asked him beforehand to take their children somewhere safe. He stated that although he tried to save her, smoke and fire prevented him from doing so. When firefighters managed to control the flames, they found Vashti's body in the master bedroom. There on the bed, just below the body, investigators found a .44 caliber revolver with the barrel toward her feet and a 5-gallon container of gasoline lying in the middle of the bed. That morning, Brett called Kai and explained what had happened. He was upset and even expressed his guilt, noting that he felt responsible for bringing his wife to this tragic end. In front of his co-workers, he maintained his CB by repeating the same details he shared with investigators. 2 days later, officers discovered Vasha's diary in her car. On the last page was a handwritten letter and suicide note taken in for forensic examination. The forensic report determined Vash died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head. She also sustained gunshot wounds to her torso and thigh. Blood and lung tests were negative for smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide, normally present in fire victims. The burns on her body prevented the examiner from concluding if it was homicide or suicide. Despite Bratt's threats about committing a perfect crime making it look like suicide to avoid punishment, things didn't go as planned. Police soon noticed inconsistencies in Bratt's story. For instance, there were no signs of dirt, blood, or wounds on him. Another inconsistency was the position of the gun with its barrel pointing downward. This raised questions about the alleged suicide. David Fetty, a special agent with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, questioned how the weapon ended up under the body. He confirmed that if Vash had shot herself in a horizontal position, the weapon would have fallen to the floor. If she had done it sitting up, it would have remained on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet did not support that Vash shot herself behind her right ear. Due to these discrepancies, David decided to dig deeper into the case. Further investigation led officers to discover documents detailing how to kill someone and make it look like suicide. While analyzing Vash's diary entry, they noticed a discrepancy in handwriting compared to her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarley concluded that the note was forged. Witnesses also reported seeing Bratt destroying hard drives a day before Vash's death. Testimony from a neighbor indicated hearing a fatal gunshot at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Bratt called 911. This confirmed David Fetty's suspicions about play. On May 13, 2011, police arrested Brad. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 additional charges of endangering his sons. Brendan and Bronson were subsequently placed in the care of Kathleen. During questioning, Brad described Vashi as not being the cheerful and balanced woman she portrayed herself to be. On the contrary, she suffered from insecurity and depression due to their rocky marriage and threats he made about taking the children away. Brad also added that after filing for divorce, Vashi felt deep depression and remorse. Consequently, she set a fire and shot herself. Despite these claims, police didn't believe him. The trial commenced on June 10, 2013. During opening statements, Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley presented her perspective to the jury and argued that no one knows better than a police officer that fire destroys evidence. When questioned about a projector, Brad stated he had used it to demonstrate to cadets how to create a fake security scenario through a real-life exercise. A forensic document examiner testified regarding the forged letter and burnt hard drives. Concerning these items, Brad claimed he destroyed them to protect his personal information, not because he needed to hide anything illicit. His attorney, Roger Falk, mentioned that Vashi had suffered from depression since high school and that her condition worsened with diet drug use. Brad's brother Robert also testified in court and supported his brother's claims by confirming that he had observed Vashi feeling depressed and sad in the 2 weeks leading up to her death. In contrast, another witness informed the jury that while Vashi indeed suffered from depression at the start of therapy, it was mainly due to the circumstances of her marriage rather than a clinical mental health issue. Recently, she had been feeling anxious about her future. The account from Rich Vash's brother echoed this sentiment, recounting the emotional turmoil in his nephews' lives. Their innocence had been shattered by Brett, leaving them deprived of the chance to get to know their parents better. Prors portrayed Brett as manipulative, claiming he used his law enforcement experience to distort facts. In response, the defense stuck to its version of the alleged suicide, highlighting that even a seasoned medical examiner couldn't determine who was at fault for the victim's death. Brett, meanwhile, portrayed himself as a loving husband and devoted father, weighed down by his wife's desire to separate. He also accused Kingman County District Judge Larry Solomoto of seeking publicity and launched into a tirade accusing the judge of seeking a ruling against him to gain a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. In the end, the jury found Brett guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Larry sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and added 6 years for other charges because they would be tried consecutively. So, Brett will be eligible for parole after more than 31 years. Judge Larry also considered that Brett did not plead guilty and lied to avoid responsibility and showed no remorse. In 2015, Brett appealed his conviction, but the Kansas Supreme Court denied his appeal and upheld the original conviction. Brendan and Bronson's uncertain future initiated a custody battle between maternal and paternal families. Kathleen filed for custody on grounds that she had already cared for them for 102 days. As neither party could reach an agreement, the custody decision was left to the judge. However, it's important to note that there's been no news yet on the outcome of this custody battle so far.